from blood slides shattering across a police station floor to a gun pressed into Dexter's face in a dark shipping yard, from a cabin door blown off its hinges to Lagerta sobbing over a charred body in the Everglades. These are the images of Dexter Morgan's control collapsing, and every single one of them has the same gravitational center, Sergeant James Doakes. Let's kick things off at the end. Dexter caught red-handed dumping his trophies, Doakes tracking him, watching him, finally forcing Dexter into a corner where the mask can't hold, the cabin where Dexter cages the only cop who ever truly scared him. The explosion that wipes Doakes off the map and neatly hands the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation a perfect scapegoat. By the time Lagerta cries over that body bag, the war is already over. But it started the first time Doakes looked at Dexter and didn't buy the act. In a show built on the fantasy of a killer hiding in plain sight, the real anomaly isn't that Dexter gets away with it for so long. The anomaly is that only one cop at Miami Metro immediately sees through him, and that man is James Doakes. While everyone else laughs at Dexter's awkward jokes and harmless lab rat psychology, Doakes walks in, takes one look, and calls him what he is, a predator. That's the paradoxical thesis of this episode. In this video, we're going to argue that the most dangerous threat to Dexter isn't a rival serial killer or some genius task force. It's a relentless, hypervigilant sergeant who actually does his job. The focus is not just on what Doakes discovers, but on how his instincts keep colliding with Dexter's carefully engineered plan for anonymity, forcing failure after failure in a system that was supposed to be airtight. To keep this clear, we're treating Doakes as Dexter's central problem across seasons 1 and 2, not the ice truck killer who weaponizes Dexter's past, not the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation, which only exists because of Dexter's own forensic arrogance. The real pressure comes from a Special Forces veteran with Black Ops scars and no patience for polite lies, whose background makes him uniquely immune to Dexter's performance of normalcy. Doakes isn't just a side character who has a hunch. He is the only person who treats Dexter like a threat from day one, and that single choice rewires the tension profile of the entire early trajectory of the show. Every time Dexter thinks the plan is back under control, Doakes appears in the doorway, at the crime scene, in the parking lot, and the facade fractures again. How many near misses does it take before we admit the system isn't working? So here's the central question. If Doakes is right about Dexter from the start, why does the story bend over backwards to erase him? What does it mean that the official record closes the Bay Harbor Butcher case on an innocent man, while the real killer walks away clean? And what does that say about the world of Dexter, and about Dexter himself, as he accepts a dead colleague as a convenient human shield? Each major section will track this collision step by step, from that first instinctual glare, to the escalating Catan Mouse surveillance, to the cabin imprisonment, to the explosive cover-up that rewrites the investigation's history. Along the way, we'll watch how every time Doakes walks into frame, Dexter's supposedly perfect system doesn't just bend, it cracks. So let's kick things off at the exact moment the system glitches. A hot Miami crime scene, blood everywhere, detectives moving through the chaos, and in walks Sergeant James Doakes, cutting straight through the noise like a warning siren. We watch him clock Dexter in seconds. Not the body. Not the evidence. Dexter, this quietly cheerful blood guy, standing a little too comfortably in the gore. Where everyone else leans in, Doakes recoils. He doesn't ask what Dexter sees. He asks, with his eyes first, what is wrong with this man? To keep this clear, we have to contrast that with the rest of Miami Metro. Masuka treats Dexter like his favorite audience for crude jokes. Angel wraps him in warmth and empathy, the good-hearted partner who believes Dexter is just socially awkward. Lagerta gives him professional respect, praising his precision and leaning on his expertise to move the investigation forward. The entire department folds Dexter into a comforting narrative, harmless, helpful, indispensable, and then Doakes steps in and calls him a creep. That word hits harder than the shove. It's not a legal term. It's not part of the official report. It's pure instinct, pure psychology. The camera lingers on Doakes' glare a beat too long, and Dexter's internal narration flags him immediately as a problem. Not because Doakes has evidence, because Doakes refuses the performance everyone else has already bought. In this video, we're going to keep returning to that gap between gut feeling and formal proof, because this is where Doakes lives. Structurally, he's the narrative glitch. In a world calibrated around Dexter's ability to pass as normal, Doakes is the one character who reacts to Dexter the way we might if we weren't seduced by the voiceover and the meticulous code. He looks at the same smile, the same politeness, and feels danger instead of comfort. The focus is not just on Doakes' aggression, but on his emotional radar. Where Angel reads Dexter's blankness as shyness, Doakes reads it as vacancy. Where Lagerta sees composure under pressure, Doakes sees an absence of fear that no healthy person should have. That interpretive gap becomes the seed of long-term suspicion. Every time Dexter is too calm, too precise, too ready with an explanation, Doakes' bad feeling hardens into a working theory. This man enjoys what he does. And look at the power imbalance baked into that setup. Dexter has narration, planning, and Harry's code. He edits the story in real time, both for us and for the people around him. Doakes has none of that. He has combat experience, trauma, and a gut that won't quiet down. Yet that's enough to start bending the entire trajectory of the show around him. One man's refusal to be charmed becomes a structural threat. So the central question becomes, if Doakes starts with nothing but a glare and a word, creep, how does that metastasize into full-blown surveillance, accusations, and a body count? The escalation starts the moment Dexter realizes this isn't a man he can joke with, manipulate, or ignore. This is the one person he might actually have to eliminate. And once that possibility enters the plan, everything that follows begins to tilt toward the cabin. That possibility, the idea that Dexter might have to kill a cop, doesn't come out of nowhere. It comes from the biography behind Doakes' glare. Before he's the sergeant barking across the bullpen, he's an Army Ranger, Special Forces, a man who spent years in covert operations, where the mission mattered more than the paperwork. We're talking black ops raids in Haiti, sanctioned violence in places where the law was technically present, but practically suspended. From the moment he steps into frame, we feel that history in his body. The way he enters a crime scene isn't casual, it's a breach. Eyes up, corners checked, hands loose but ready. He doesn't do small talk, he does threat assessment. Every hallway is a potential ambush, every conversation a probe. To keep this clear, Doakes doesn't move through Miami Metro like a coworker. He moves through it like enemy territory that's temporarily under control. That's why his temper reads differently once we factor in that past. He's quick to snap, quick to shove, quick to draw down in an alley, not because he's a cartoon hothead, but because his nervous system is calibrated for combat, not HR. In a war zone, that hair trigger response keeps you alive. In a fluorescent lit office, it looks like a disciplinary problem. The central question becomes, what happens when you drop that battlefield psychology into a homicide investigation built on coffee, banter, and chain of custody forms? And this is where the mirror to Dexter really sharpens. Both men are fluent in violence. Both operate in moral gray zones where the official story and the real story never quite line up. Both live double lives, Dexter as the smiling blood spatter analyst masking a ritual killer, Doakes as the decorated cop who comes home from serving his country carrying ghosts no commendation can erase. One hides his darkness behind a lab coat, the other hides it behind a badge and a classified file. But there's a crucial asymmetry. Dexter has Harry's code, a private rulebook that turns murder into a plan, a ritual that promises control and meaning. Doakes has something more public and, in some ways, more dangerous institutional permission, a chain of command that sends him into moral no man's land, then looks the other way when the reports come back messy. Dexter's darkness is constrained by a father's voice in his head. Doakes' darkness is constrained by whether the mission gets results. That's exactly why he's uniquely lethal to Dexter. He recognizes the posture, the deadness in the eyes, the way someone who has done real violence carries their shoulders and scans a room. He clocks the absence of normal fear because he's lived in that headspace himself. When everyone else at Miami Metro buys the harmless nerd act, Doakes' combat radar pings. From the first season on, the investigation is one man's gut versus another man's code. And as we move into the next phase of their conflict, that background stops being texture and becomes a tactical problem. In this video, we're going to watch how those black ops skills, tailing, surveillance, pressure point confrontations turn Doakes from an angry colleague into a hunter. Dexter isn't being stalked by a clueless bureaucrat. He's under the eye of someone trained to find monsters in war zones. Now that man thinks he's found one in his own lab. So when that hunter walks into Dexter's orbit, the tension doesn't start with a car chase or a gunfight. It starts with a look, a silence. The one man in Miami Metro who refuses to play along with Dexter's performance. Let's kick things off with those early needles. At a crime scene, where everyone else is laughing at Dexter's awkward gallows humor, Doakes just stares. No smile, no social lubricant, just, "You're a creep, Morgan." When Dexter stands over a mutilated body with that eerie stillness, Masuka cracks a joke. Deb rolls her eyes. The room moves on. Doakes doesn't. He clocks the lack of shock, the lack of disgust, the lack of anything. That's a data point. To keep this clear, Dexter's whole social strategy is built on controlled misdirection. He's designed a persona of mild, helpful weirdness. The blood guy who brings pastries, volunteers for the boring work, leans into his own awkwardness so no one feels threatened. It's a plan that works on almost everyone, because most people want to accept a harmless narrative. But to someone trained in special forces, in interrogation, in reading false affect under stress, that same persona looks like overacting. We see the micro failures pile up. Dexter reacts half a beat too late when told a victim was a child, then quickly adds a line about how tragic it is. Doakes watches the delay, not the word. Dexter overcompensates with small talk in the elevator, trying to seem chatty, and Doakes cuts him off with a flat save it. At the ice truck killer scenes, Dexter's eyes linger on the artistry of the dismemberment a moment too long, and when he finally offers a comment, it's analytical, not human. Each time, the camera gives us Doakes' skeptical stare, silently filing it away. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to that silent filing system, because the central question for Doakes isn't, is Dexter weird? It's why does his weirdness never quite match the room? Along the way, we watch Doakes' pattern recognition turn instinct into a private investigation. Dexter is always at the right crime scene, always a little too composed, always a little too interested in the details normal people look away from. No proof yet, but the mental case file is open. The focus is not just on what Dexter does, but on how the show frames it. Internally, his voiceover insists that he's in control, that the mask is airtight, that Doakes is just an angry outlier. Externally, every shared frame contradicts that story. Dexter smiles, Doakes glares. Dexter narrates that he's blending in. The shot lingers on Doakes watching him leave. Which perspective do we trust? And crucially, this changes Dexter's behavior. He stops treating Doakes as background noise and starts planning around him, checking sightlines before slipping away, timing his forensic work to avoid overlap, rerouting his stalking patterns when he senses Doakes tailing him. What began as an annoying coworker becomes an operational variable, a constraint on the code, a moving threat vector inside his own department. These are tiny cracks, not yet the catastrophic failures. But from here on, every time Dexter's plan falters in seasons 1 and 2, Doakes is either in the room or closing in from just off screen. The hunter is still guessing. The mask is still on. The next phase is what happens when instinct hardens into certainty, and Dexter's illusion of control has to lock a door on it. And the first time that door really rattles is one of those season 1 moments that plays almost like a horror scene in reverse. The monster is on the hunt. The hero is the one in the dark, closing in without even realizing how close he is to the kill zone. Let's kick things off with that early, near miss around Tony Tucci and the ice truck investigation. Dexter has already clocked the pattern, already built his plan. He's visiting Tucci in the hospital, circling the case, using his forensic access to stay 3 steps ahead of the official investigation. But there's a shadow in his peripheral vision, James Doakes, watching him a little too long, following a little too far, showing up at the same late-night locations where Dexter scouts and stalks. We see it on one of Dexter's hunts when he peels away from the station under cover of routine work. The ritual is supposed to be simple. Stalk the target, confirm the victims, prepare the kill room. Instead, he's checking his mirrors, he's clocking headlights. He's realizing that Doakes has started trailing him off the clock, turning a clean operational plan into a moving puzzle. For once, Dexter isn't savoring the psychology of his prey. He's running time calculations in his head and wondering, if Doakes turns that corner right now, what does he see? This is where his usual confidence falters. On the dock, near a potential dump site, he's not luxuriating in control. He cuts the reconnaissance short. He improvises a fake call, a detour, a mundane excuse to explain why a blood spatter analyst is alone near the water at midnight. To keep this clear, the failure here isn't that Dexter gets caught. It's that he has to abandon his own ritual to avoid that possibility. The dark passenger hates that. The code wasn't designed for an enemy who can read his body language. The tactical contrast is sharp. Dexter is built to dismantle predictable predators, serial offenders with patterns, routines, blind spots. Doakes is the opposite. No pattern Dexter can chart. Military training, black ops instincts, and a willingness to break rules that makes him fundamentally uncontrollable. While Dexter is setting plastic and sharpening knives in his head, Doakes is circling crime-adjacent spaces, cutting across Dexter's trajectory at odd angles, refusing to stay in any lane Dexter can anticipate. And Doakes isn't just suspicious in the abstract. He's actively inserting himself into Dexter's nights. He shows up outside Dexter's apartment at off hours. He appears at scenes Dexter visits by coincidence. He challenges Dexter about his late arrivals and early exits, forcing those two lives, lab tech and hunter, to occupy the same frame. The focus is not just on what Doakes knows, but on how his presence contaminates Dexter's process. Along the way, we watch Dexter's internal reaction shift. At first, it's annoyance at the loud sergeant who won't play along with the harmless nerd act. Then, it hardens into genuine concern as he recognizes a persistent counterforce. This isn't a temporary obstacle in the investigation. It's a man whose instincts are locking onto the truth. If Doakes can accidentally wander into Dexter's orbit now, what happens when he starts doing it on purpose, aiming straight for the kill room instead of just the crime scene? And that's where the paradox really snaps into focus. The one person whose instincts are locking onto Dexter is also the one person in that building who actually understands him. Not morally, psychologically, two predators, one precinct. To keep this clear, look at their day jobs. Dexter is the quiet engine of half their big investigations. His blood work, his reconstruction of spatter. His calm presence at the table make him indispensable. Doakes is the battering ram, the guy they send through the door when the suspect is armed, volatile, and one bad decision away from a massacre. Different tools, same result. They both deliver bodies and answers when the pressure is on. But watch how they occupy Miami Metro's emotional space. The bullpen runs on gallows humor, messy breakroom confessions, and the illusion that this is just a job, not a daily march through human ruin. Dexter hovers at the edges, politely detached, hiding the fact that blood isn't traumatic for him. It's fascinating. Doakes stands in the middle of it, radiating a permanent low-level threat, hiding nothing about his anger at what people do to each other. We see Dexter's darkness in that eerie stillness over a corpse, the way his eyes linger on a wound pattern a beat too long. We see Doakes's in the opposite register, explosive confrontations, grabbing a suspect a little too hard, barking at a colleague who cracks the wrong joke at the wrong time. One predator internalizes everything. The other externalizes all of it. The focus is not just on their behavior, but on how the same inner violence takes opposite paths out into the world, and everyone around them responds in a way that tells on the culture. Dexter's oddness is indulged as quirk. Masuka teases him, Deb defends him, Lagerta praises the results, and waves away the vacant smile. Doakes' aggression, though, that gets labeled a problem. He's written up, side-eyed, told to calm down, even when the rage is coming from the same place Dexter's detachment does, a different relationship to violence and empathy than the rest of the room can stomach. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to this. Doakes is the socially unacceptable version of what Dexter actually is. Too blunt about his rage. Too honest about the fact that killing, in his world, is a tool he's used and might need again. Too unwilling to pretend everything is fine when he knows it isn't. Dexter's internal narration seals the mirror. He doesn't think of Doakes as a wounded colleague or even a rival. He files him under problem. A variable to manage. A threat to his plan for control. That's the same mental folder he uses for his victims, and once he puts Doakes there, every confrontation becomes something more than plot. It's two incompatible survival strategies colliding inside the same institution, one hiding in the lab, one pacing the halls. So what happens over time when two predators share the same territory and neither will back down? The ecosystem doesn't stabilize. It escalates. Along the way, every stake in Dexter's life, his job, his cover, his code, will get pulled into that escalation, and the show is about to lean into it hard. Season 1 is where Doakes turns that shared territory into a pressure cooker. From the pilot on, he's the one cop who doesn't laugh at Dexter's jokes, doesn't pat him on the back, doesn't buy the harmless lab nerd act for a second. Everyone else sees a quirky blood guy. Doakes sees a blank space, and he does not let it go. We watch it start as pure hostility. In the briefing room, Doakes snaps at Dexter for chiming in, cuts him off in front of the squad, challenges his read on crime scenes as if Dexter's analysis is an intrusion rather than a contribution. At crime scenes, he steps into Dexter's personal space, stares too long, throws out lines like "I don't like you," with no attempt to soften them. To keep this clear, there's no plan, no investigation, no file, just a man whose instincts are screaming that this guy is wrong. Then, the pattern hardens. Doakes keeps showing up where Dexter expects anonymity and control. Dexter slips away from Rita's family dinner. Doakes is at the crime scene he thought he could breeze through. Dexter tries to fade into the background at work. Doakes calls on him in front of everyone, forcing him to improvise opinions instead of hiding behind data. Each appearance is a tiny collision between Dexter's carefully managed facade and a cop who refuses to be managed. Socially, Doakes is running stress tests. He pokes at Dexter during briefings, throws in dark jokes about violence, watches for flinches that never come. He questions Dexter's empathy when victims are discussed, needles him at the bar, and keeps pushing. What happens if this lab rat feels cornered, embarrassed, exposed? The central question for Doakes isn't, is Dexter a serial killer? Yet, it's why doesn't this guy react like a person? And that's exactly why he's dangerous. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to this idea. You can sanitize a crime scene, you can dump the body, you can even rewrite the narrative of an entire case, but you cannot bleach out a cop's gut feeling once it locks onto you. Dexter's usual safeguards, no witnesses, no anomalies, no loose ends, don't apply to a suspicion that lives entirely in someone's psychology. We see Dexter adjust. He skips opportunities when Doakes is nearby, lets potential victims walk because he can feel eyes on him, delays kills he's already ritualized because he can't account for Doakes' movements. He alters cover stories, over-explains late nights, recalibrates how normal he needs to appear. Every small deviation is a hairline crack in the illusion of absolute control he narrates to us. The writers weaponize that. Every time Dexter's voiceover reassures us he's safe, the camera cuts to Doakes staring from a doorway, listening just off frame, tailing his car through Miami traffic. Each major section will keep building this pattern. Dexter asserts dominance. The show cuts to reality. Season 1 is Doakes circling the shark, feeling the current shift without knowing what swims beneath. Season 2 is when he finally spots the fin, names it, and forces Dexter's entire trajectory into open conflict. Season 2 opens on Dexter already slipping. The tides have shifted, and for once, it is not because of a clever rival or a new code-breaking philosophy. It is because his own life is leaking out of its container. Rita is suspicious, pushing him into NA meetings. His rehab from addiction turns his killings into a metaphor he has to perform. And in the middle of that performance, he starts missing. The syringe shakes. The kill rooms do not land. The plan is wobbling before the real pressure even starts. This is important because when the pressure comes, it is not subtle. Divers cut through the green murk off Miami's coast, lights sweeping across the ocean floor. Then they hit it. Garbage bags. Bone, dozens of dismembered bodies rising to the surface like a mass confession. Dexter's private ritual, the blood slides, and the weighted corpses he thought were perfectly controlled, suddenly becomes a public crime scene. The Bay Harbor Butcher investigation is born in a single, catastrophic breach of control. In this video, we're going to keep returning to this paradox. The very trophies Dexter hoards to feel safe are the evidence that exposes him. Those neat little glass slides, each one a victory, now sit on a projector in his own lab, while a task force builds a monster out of his habits. To keep this clear, the focus is not just on the investigation, but on what that investigation does to Doakes' psychology. Because for Doakes, this is vindication. He has spent an entire season being the only cop who looks at Dexter and sees a problem, not a mascot. Now, Miami has a serial killer with a pattern that matches Dexter's professional orbit: forensic precision, dismemberment, ocean dumps. The central question in his mind shifts from "what is wrong with this guy" to "how does this guy fit into what is wrong with Miami?" The story finally gives his instinct a name: Bay Harbor Butcher. Watch how his hostility sharpens. He is no longer just barking at Dexter in hallways. He is clocking Dexter's reactions in briefings, challenging his analyses, noticing every flinch when the slides appear on screen. Short sentence. Short sentence. Longer elaboration. This is suspicion turning into a working theory, even if he cannot articulate it yet without sounding insane. And Dexter feels it. Those slides were his most intimate secret, the physical proof that his code existed, that his life had structure. Now they are evidence tags, 10 feet from Doakes' stare. How do you maintain the illusion of control when your worst failure is literally being passed around the room? Along the way, the trajectories lock. As the task force gears up to hunt the butcher, Doakes quietly adjusts his own plan. Let everyone else chase the myth in the water. He is going to follow the man behind the microscope. That silent decision is the cliff we end on. 2 investigations, one official and one personal, both closing in on the same target, even if only one of them knows Dexter's face. So when Doakes goes off book, the whole texture of the hunt changes. Up to this point, Dexter has been living in that comfortable illusion that investigations happen in conference rooms and case files. Now the real investigation is happening in a parked sedan, 2 car lengths back, with James Doakes watching every move. Let's kick things off with that quiet decision. Doakes stops trying to win the room and starts working like he's back in Special Forces. No more complaints to LaGuerta. No more shouting matches in the bullpen. Instead, he clocks Dexter's shift end, tails him out of the lot, and just follows. Headlights dimmed, distance calibrated, patience dialed in. This is not a cop checking a hunch. This is a hunter building a pattern. We see it in those car sequences. Dexter driving towards some industrial dead zone, expecting another clean kill window. Doakes a few lengths behind, engine low, eyes locked, noting every turn. Warehouse district, marina, access roads, empty stretches of highway that make no sense for a mild-mannered blood guy. To keep this clear, Doakes isn't looking for a single smoking gun. He's assembling a map of Dexter's nocturnal life. Then there's the surveillance closer to home. Doakes parked near Dexter's apartment complex, pretending to read a file while he times Dexter's comings and goings. The early morning departures. The nights where Dexter leaves with a gym bag and comes back with nothing. No confrontation. No warning. Just that silent pressure of being observed, night after night. The tactical intelligence here is brutal. Doakes has done covert ops in Haiti. He understands that if you confront too early, the target adapts. So he holds. He watches. He lets Dexter's own need for ritual expose him. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to this gap between Dexter's belief in control and the reality of other people's competence. Doakes is the first character whose plan actually respects Dexter as an opponent. And Dexter feels it. His routine shreds almost overnight. Windows of opportunity slam shut because that black sedan might be around the corner. Potential kill nights become stakeout nights, where he's not hunting a criminal, he's scanning mirrors for Doakes. He aborts kills. He dumps prep work. He burns energy on misdirection instead of precision. Operationally, the code is still the same, but the logistics are collapsing. We get that key failure moment when Dexter thinks he's finally shaken him. He sets up a kill, isolates the target, starts the choreography he's repeated for years. Then, a glimpse of a familiar car. Or a small inconsistency that tells him he's been tailed into the operation. Suddenly, the plan flips from execution to escape. No lesson, no catharsis, just raw panic. Psychologically, this is the first sustained role reversal. Dexter's narration, usually smug and detached when it comes to Doakes, starts to fracture. He's irritated, then anxious, then genuinely rattled. The central question shifts from how do I satisfy the passenger to how do I survive James Doakes? How long can a predator function when someone just as relentless is tracking them? Along the way, the show makes one thing clear. This tailing phase cannot last. Two investigations are converging, and Dexter is losing room to maneuver. It's only a matter of time before Doakes doesn't just follow him to a suspicious location. He follows him to a place where there's a body on the table, plastic on the walls, and no story in the world that can save him. So when those tailing sequences run out of road, the show shifts the battlefield. Dexter's not just being followed anymore, he's being cross-examined. And James Doakes is the only character in the first 2 seasons who treats every word out of Dexter's mouth as potential evidence, not social lubrication. Let's kick things off with the pattern the show builds almost immediately. Season 1, late nights at crime scenes. Dexter drifting a little too close to the edge of the tape, eyes lingering a little too long on the bodies. Most people write it off as morbid curiosity from the blood guy. Doakes walks up, stares him down, and says what everyone else refuses to, "You creep me out." No smile, no softening. Dexter offers some neat line about being fascinated by human behavior. Doakes doesn't even pretend to buy it, he just files it away. From there, each conversation becomes a failed plan of social camouflage. When Dexter shows up at the scene of the mutilated Haitian gang members, he tosses out a simple cover. Wrong place, wrong time, just following the investigation. Doakes' Special Forces past in Haiti kicks in. He watches Dexter's eyes, the way he stands too still, and snaps back that Dexter has no business there. Short question. Short answer. Longer, profanity-laced pushback. The central question for Doakes is never, is this polite? It's always, does this add up? To keep this clear, we can zoom in on one of the cleanest line-by-line failures, the parking lot confrontation after Dexter has been tailing him. Dexter claims he's just out for a drive, offers a flimsy coincidence. Doakes steps closer, reads the micro-hesitation, and detonates it. "You following me, motherf?" Dexter tries to upgrade the lie, layering in concern about Doakes' safety, about the investigation. The more emotion he adds, the more Doakes hears performance instead of authenticity. We watch Dexter's mask work on everyone else. On Doakes, it just slides off. By season 2, the stakes escalate with the Bay Harbor butcher case. Dexter's plan is to act stressed like everyone else, to blend into the panic. In this video, we're going to keep returning to that gap between intention and outcome. And here it's brutal. At the marina, Dexter gives a rehearsed speech about being overwhelmed, about needing space. Doakes studies him, not the words. He notices Dexter's calm hands, the lack of genuine adrenaline, and refuses the social script where you back off a grieving coworker. He presses harder. Why is Dexter always near the weirdness? Why does nothing ever rattle him? Along the way, the show uses Doakes as a structural stress test. If a lie can survive Doakes, it can survive anyone. When it doesn't, we feel the immediate danger. There's a moment in the interrogation room where that danger almost explodes into confession or violence. Doakes crowds Dexter, accuses him of being connected to the butcher. Dexter's eyes flash, the dark passenger surges, and for a beat, the only honest response would be a knife. Instead, he retreats, swallows the urge, and lets the failure stand. These conversational collapses form a quiet failure montage of lies, each neat explanation punctured, Each calm performance rejected pushes Doakes from hunches to a hunt for proof. The words have done all they can. In the next phase of this trajectory, Doakes stops arguing with Dexter's story and starts dismantling his life, one piece of evidence at a time. Now, the hunt stops being theoretical. The Bay Harbor Butcher investigation drops like a bloodstain over everything, and Doakes finally gets a frame big enough to hang Dexter in. Let's kick things off with the profile the task force builds. Someone is killing other killers. No sexual signature, no trophies in the usual sense, just immaculate disposal and a terrifying level of forensic control. The ocean dumps, the dismemberment, the precision cuts that look like they were done by someone who understands evidence, decomposition, and trace. On paper, it reads like a dark mirror of Miami Metro's own lab. In the room, nobody says Dexter's name, but the case is already orbiting him. To keep this clear, the central question for Doakes shifts from what's wrong with this guy to why does this guy keep showing up where the butcher lives. He's been keeping an informal file in his head for a full season now. Dexter's strange calm around mutilated bodies has habit of drifting towards certain victims. The way his eyes light up when they talk about prior offenses instead of the fresh crime scene. When the butcher's victim list starts to look like a vigilante's dream board, that mental file snaps into alignment with the official investigation. We watch it crystallize in small, sharp moments. A briefing where Masuka and Dexter lay out the butcher's meticulous method, and Dexter sounds a little too admiring. A slide of tissue under glass, the lab lights catching on it. Doakes isn't listening to the words. He's watching Dexter's face. There's a flicker of recognition there, not curiosity. He's not discovering this killer. He's remembering him. How many times have we seen Dexter sell that same blank mask and have it work? With Doakes, the performance finally fails. Doakes' Black Ops background becomes the bridge. He's done covert kills, he's handled bodies, he understands operational security, how a real operator plans routes, dumps, contingencies in this video. We're going to keep coming back to this. The focus is not just on what Dexter does, but on who can actually read that behavior. Doakes knows that this level of efficiency doesn't come from a random psycho. It comes from someone with training, access, and time. An insider. So he tests the theory. He tails Dexter to crime scenes that aren't on his roster. He notices when Dexter arrives a little too fast to a fresh dump. He drops an offhand comment to LaGuerta about that lab rat being everywhere, and she waves it off as personal beef. Another quiet collapse of institutional oversight. Each dismissal pushes him further into rogue territory, because if the system won't investigate its golden boy, he will. Meanwhile, Dexter feels the net tightening and starts running countermeasures. He accidentally misdirects a trace lead. He over-explains his insights so they sound like textbook forensics instead of intimate knowledge of the butcher's psychology. He plays up the harmless tech persona in meetings, exaggerating his social awkwardness as if incompetence could be a shield. But that only works on people who want to believe in the code of their own department. Doakes doesn't. By the end of this phase, he still doesn't have a body on Dexter. No smoking gun. What he has is more dangerous. A coherent story. A trajectory where the weird blood guy, the perfect dumps, and the empty eyes all line up into one conclusion. Dexter Morgan is the Bay Harbor Butcher, and Doakes is done arguing about it. The next step is proof, even if he has to break every rule he ever served to get it. So when does that coherent story between Doakes and Dexter finally explode into something everyone can see? It happens in a hallway, under fluorescent lights, with witnesses. No more muttered suspicions, no more sideways glares. Just raw hostility, finally tearing through the thin skin of workplace professionalism. Let's kick things off with the precinct confrontation in Season 2, right as the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation starts circling Dexter's blood slides. Doakes has already been pulled off the case, already told to back down. He does the opposite. He stalks across the bullpen, eyes locked on Dexter, and slams him into the lockers, hands on the shirt, forearm to the chest. That quiet blood guy is suddenly the center of a storm. In that moment, Doakes abandons subtlety completely. He doesn't just say he doesn't like Dexter. He calls him a freak, a ghoul, the only one who shows up at every crime scene with a smile. He gets in Dexter's face, voice raised, body language screaming that this is not a joke, this is not office banter. And crucially, he does it where Batista, Masuka, Deb, and the rest of Miami Metro can see the whole collapse of restraint. The central question is, how does Dexter respond when his mask is attacked in public and he cannot fight back? He does the one thing his code and his plan allow. He folds. He lowers his eyes, raises his hands, plays the harmless victim. No counterpunch, no threat, not even a sharp word. He lets Doakes look like the aggressor, lets the other cops physically pull Doakes off him, lets the scene read like harassment instead of an investigation. To keep this clear, the focus is not just on the shove itself, it's on the social fallout. Within minutes, the narrative around both men shifts. Doakes becomes the unhinged sergeant with a temper problem, the guy who has it out for the nice lab tech. Dexter becomes the reasonable professional who never fights back. On paper, this should protect the department. In practice, it protects the killer. And that is where this confrontation becomes a tactical failure for Doakes. He's right about Dexter, but by losing his temper in public, he hands Dexter institutional sympathy and bureaucratic cover. LaGuardia has to sideline him. Colleagues roll their eyes at his warnings. Each outburst makes his underlying investigation sound less credible, not more. The plan to expose Dexter through pressure turns into self-sabotage. Psychologically, though, something else shifts. Dexter realizes Doakes is no longer just a professional threat. He's emotionally invested, wounded, personally offended by Dexter's existence. That makes him less predictable and more dangerous. A calm hunter follows patterns. An angry one breaks them. In this video, we're going to trace how this hallway explosion sets up the next phase. Doakes has shown his hand emotionally. Along the way, he learns that rage won't be enough. The next moves will have to be quieter, surveillance, isolation, and hard evidence, far from the safety of the precinct's bright lights. That hallway outburst doesn't just embarrass Doakes. It gets him benched. The moment he lets that anger bleed through, the institution does what institutions always do with inconvenient truth-tellers. It sidelines him and writes it up as a behavioral problem rather than a valid warning. Internal Affairs leans in. LaGuardia has to defend the department's image. Suddenly, Doakes isn't the sharp cop with elite instincts. He's the liability who can't work well with others. He's pulled off key parts of the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation, reprimanded for harassing Dexter, and nudged into mandatory leave and counseling. On paper, his leverage collapses. The one person who is right about Dexter loses official control over the case that matters most. So, he does what he learned to do long before Miami Metro. He goes off the grid. This is where his black ops past stops being backstory and starts being operating procedure. To keep this clear, Doakes doesn't just tail Dexter casually. He runs unauthorized surveillance. He camps outside Dexter's apartment. He tracks his boat. He breaks into spaces he has no warrant for, because the central question in his mind isn't, is this admissible? It's, is this real? We watch him follow Dexter to the marina, to late-night drives, to those strange gaps in Dexter's schedule that no normal blood spatter analyst should have. No backup, no partner, no chain of command. It's the same pattern he would have used in Haiti. Isolate the target, gather intel, move in the shadows. The focus is not just on his suspicion. It's on the way his entire psychology reverts to covert mode the second the official investigation starts treating him as the problem instead of the solution. And here's the double bind that makes this so tragic. The more he's right, the worse he looks. Every accurate hunch demands another rule he has to break. Every broken rule becomes another line in a file, calling him unstable, obsessed, potentially dangerous. From the outside, what do his superiors see? Not a man closing in on a serial killer, but a sergeant stalking a harmless lab tech he openly hates. That dynamic crystallizes when he breaks into Dexter's car and finds the blood slide box. It's not a warrant-approved search, it's not clean procedure, but it is the closest thing to the truth he's ever held in his hands. Those slides, glinting under the light, confirm everything his gut has been screaming since season 1. Yet legally, they're poison fruit. He can't use them without outing his own misconduct. Along the way, this rogue status becomes Dexter's hidden asset. If Doakes disappears, if anything unfortunate happens, there's already a thick paper trail framing him as volatile, insubordinate, maybe even capable of being the Bay Harbor butcher himself. Dexter doesn't have to manufacture that narrative from scratch. Miami Metro has been writing it for him in every reprimand. By stepping outside the system to catch a monster, Doakes is unknowingly stepping into the perfect silhouette of one. The investigation's trajectory is shifting. The question is no longer who the butcher is, but who will be easiest to blame when everything finally blows open. That shift in the investigation's trajectory doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens while Dexter's own life is compressing from every direction at once, turning evasion from a clever plan into an impossible fantasy. Doakes is tailing him. The Bay Harbor Butcher Task Force is building a profile that looks uncomfortably like Dexter's day job, and his carefully curated normal life with Rita and the kids is fraying under the pressure of late nights and missing explanations. From Doakes waiting outside his apartment, to following him to NA meetings, to popping up at docks and crime scenes Dexter thought were safe. We watched the old pattern crack, stalk the target, maintain the cover, control the variables. That used to be enough. Now every alleyway feels like a trap, every syringe feels like a risk, because Doakes is always one step behind, and the official investigation is starting to ask the same questions he is. This is where Dexter's internal calculus changes. Up to this point, the central question in his head has been, how do I stay away from Doakes? Suddenly it becomes, what do I do about Doakes? That's a moral and psychological pivot. The focus is not just on logistics anymore, but on whether Harry's code can stretch to include a man who hasn't killed innocents, but who could destroy everything. We see that tension crystallize in the Everglades scene. Dexter has taken Doakes out under the pretense of a case, knife within reach, the swamp offering the perfect body dump. For a heartbeat, he imagines it. Plastic, a confession, one more name on the slide. Then, Harry appears in his mind, not as a comforting guide, but as an accusation. Killing Doakes would break the code. It would make Dexter exactly what Harry feared. He pulls back. The opportunity passes, and with it, the illusion that this is a simple operational problem. So he experiments with softer containment. To keep this clear, Dexter doesn't start by plotting murder. He starts by attacking Doakes' institutional armor. He leans into Doakes' reputation for rage, lets colleagues see the outbursts, subtly frames him as unstable. When Doakes assaults him in the precinct, Dexter doesn't fight back. He lets the system write Doakes up, Suspend him, push him to the margins. On paper, that strategy works. Doakes' badge is compromised, his access limited, his credibility shredded in front of the very people he needs to convince. But the consequences are darker than Dexter anticipates. Without the structure of Miami Metro, Doakes becomes exactly what Dexter is, a free agent operating off the grid. The investigation doesn't stop, it just loses supervision. And here's the strategic irony. By undercutting Doakes inside the institution, Dexter is clearing the runway for a purely physical confrontation, one that can't be mediated by policy, partners, or paperwork. Each major section will escalate from paperwork to blood, from reprimands to restraints. Along the way, Dexter's plan is about to collapse in a new direction. Not because he's caught, but because he's forced into a scenario Harry never trained him for. Not killing the innocent man who knows his secret, but caging him, alive, in a cabin in the middle of nowhere. So when we say Dexter's plan collapses into that cabin, it's not a random twist. It's the endpoint of 4 trajectories grinding toward each other until there's nowhere else for the pressure to go. On one side, we have Doakes' rogue investigation. The one cop who never bought the harmless lab nerd act is now tailing Dexter off the books, breaking into his apartment, stealing his blood slides. On another, the official Bay Harbor Butcher Task Force is tightening, using those same slides and ocean dumps to build a profile that, without knowing it, points straight at their own forensic analyst. Layered over that, Dexter's self-control is fraying. He's juggling Rita, the baby, the code, and this constant surveillance. The softer containment tactics he tried with Doakes, misdirection, gaslighting, stay away from me warnings, have all failed. To keep this clear, the focus is not just on one mistake, but on how every attempted fix creates a bigger crack. When Dexter plants heroin in Doakes' car to get him suspended, it doesn't neutralize the threat, it radicalizes him. Stripped of badge and backup, Doakes is free to follow his instincts with no paperwork, no partner, no oversight. That's not a solution. That's an accelerant. The specific breaking point comes when those threads finally intersect in the field. Doakes doesn't just catch Dexter acting weird at a crime scene. He catches him in a context that can't be spun, out near a body dump site, with tools and chemicals that make no sense for a night off. No witnesses, no plausible work excuse, no I was just curious smile that can diffuse it. In that instant, Dexter realizes there is no more room to maneuver. Doakes has seen too much, knows the Bay Harbor Butcher file too well, and has already risked his career to chase this hunch. Discrediting him further would only raise more questions inside Miami Metro. Letting him walk away means the investigation, formal and informal, finally converge on the same name. So, Dexter improvises, and not in the way Harry's code trained him. There's no confirmed kill table, no meticulous vetting, no righteous target. Instead of a clean kill, he lunges for a desperate third option: abduction. Chloroform instead of a syringe on plastic. A living cop in his trunk. A remote cabin as a holding cell while he figures out what to do next. This is Dexter's plan truly falling apart. The man who worships control is now dragging a conscious, furious sergeant through the mud, literally locking his problem in the woods and hoping time will give him clarity. It's messy, untested, psychologically off script. From Doakes' perspective, the moment is almost heroic at first. His obsession has finally paid off. He's found the monster, caught him in motion. But that rush curdles fast when he wakes up chained in what is effectively the Bay Harbor Butcher's lair, knowing that even if he gets out, who will believe the disgraced cop accused of drug possession? In this video, we're going to sit with that cabin as more than a plot device. It becomes the crucible where Dexter and Doakes' philosophies collide. And, along the way, where an entirely different monster, Leela, will rewrite the official story of the Bay Harbor Butcher forever. Before that cabin becomes a prison, we need to see the night where the roles quietly start to reverse. Dexter slips out into Miami's neon, telling himself it's just another routine hunt, another name to be crossed off under Harry's code. But the city feels different, tighter, as if the streets themselves are part of an investigation he can't see. Because somewhere behind him, James Doakes is already in motion. Headlights hanging back a little too long, a familiar car in the rearview mirror. Dexter, who usually glides through the night with surgical control, is suddenly calculating traffic lights, side streets, and reflections in glass. This is not the Bay Harbor Butcher in command of his territory. This is prey testing the perimeter of the cage and realizing the bars are moving with him. To keep this clear, the plan Dexter thinks he's running is simple. Stalk the target, confirm the victims, prepare the kill site, leave no evidence. But Doakes has his own plan now, and it's even simpler. Follow the lab geek. Don't lose him. See what happens when the mask thinks no one is watching. The parking lot confrontation is where those two trajectories collide. Concrete, sodium lights buzzing, empty spaces that should feel anonymous and safe. Dexter steps out of his car, rehearsing the next phase of his ritual, and Doakes just emerges from the dark like a verdict. No backup, no warrant, just pure instinct and a simmering certainty that this man is lying to everyone. Watch Doakes' body language here. He crowds Dexter's space, but never quite touches him, forcing Dexter to either stand his ground or look away. His questions are basic on the surface. Where were you? Why are you here? What's with the weird hours? But he's not listening to the words. He's watching the micro delays, the half breath before Dexter answers, the way his eyes flick toward exits. How often do we actually see Dexter flinch? In this video, we're going to keep coming back to moments like this, where the central question isn't, will Dexter get caught, but what happens to his psychology when he feels catchable. Here, for the first time, he's improvising under a cop's direct scrutiny, with no kill room, no plastic, no controlled environment to retreat to. The hunter is standing in an open lot, under fluorescent light, being profiled in real time. The focus is not just on Doakes thinking Dexter is odd. This is the night he starts to believe Dexter is dangerous. The way Dexter over-explains. The late hours that don't match his job. The empty trunk that feels too carefully empty. Doakes' training in covert ops taught him to trust patterns, but also to trust the feeling when a pattern is being actively concealed. So he quietly decides. The rules of internal affairs, of procedure, of chain of command, those can bend. This man is worth breaking them for. Along the way, the show plants a seed we'll watch grow into a full collapse. As Dexter drives off, pretending the encounter is over, Doakes lingers in the frame, eyes narrowed, clocking a tiny nervous tell in Dexter's jaw. It's nothing. It's everything. And that hairline crack, in Doakes' mind, is already the start of a fault line. And then the universe hands Doakes something he doesn't get very often, with Dexter Morgan. Physical, undeniable evidence. Not a vibe. Not a nervous jaw twitch. Blood? We're in the parking lot. Early morning Miami light, that hazy golden wash the show loves. Dexter steps out of his car expecting routine banter, the usual performance, self-deprecating lab rat, coffee in hand, harmless. He's already running the internal checklist of his night's work, reassuring himself the plan held. The kill room is clean. The body is gone. Control restored. But as he walks toward the building, the camera drops low. We see it before he does. A fine mist of red across the edge of his shoes. It's subtle, the kind of detail only a forensics tech or a predator would notice. And waiting by the entrance, arms folded, is the predator who isn't pretending to be anything else. Doakes. The moment Dexter steps into his shadow, the tone shifts. No greeting, no small talk, just that unblinking stare, sliding down to the shoes and back up to Dexter's face. The central question hangs there without being spoken. Why does the blood guy, who is supposedly meticulous, have fresh blood spatter on his own clothes? To keep this clear, what Doakes does next is deceptively simple. He doesn't accuse. He doesn't blow up. He just asks. Where were you last night? What happened to your shoes? On paper, it's nothing more than a colleague following a lead. Psychologically, it's a wedge. Because everyone else would accept Dexter's easy explanation about a crime scene, an accident, a spill. Doakes refuses that shortcut. He knows what controlled splatter looks like. He knows what panic looks like. The show lets us live inside that panic. Tight framing clamps down on Dexter's face, while Doakes' shoulders fill the foreground like a wall. The ambient sound of the parking lot dulls, replaced by a low, tense hum. Dexter's voice stays light, but the performance cracks in microscopic ways. A half-beat pause, a glance that lingers too long on the exit. We feel Doakes' suspicion closing in because the camera keeps trapping Dexter between concrete pillars and Doakes' eyes. Here's the paradox hook, the blood expert who can't keep his own shoes clean. For Doakes, this isn't just suspicious, it's structurally damning. Dexter's entire cover is built on one premise, that he is meticulous, that he never slips. Once Doakes clocks that visible stain, he has proof that Dexter can be sloppy, impulsive, dangerous in ways that leak into the real investigation. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to moments like this, where a tiny operational failure, one drop, one shoe, one question, reshapes the entire trajectory of the hunt. Along the way, that speck of blood becomes a narrative fracture line. Doakes stops seeing Dexter as merely strange and starts treating him as active threat. And from here on, every late arrival, every half-truth, every missing hour will only drive that wedge deeper, until suspicion hardens into certainty and the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation finally finds a face. Suspicion hardens into certainty, and then Doakes does something no one else in Miami Metro even thinks to do. He takes the investigation off the books and into the bar. If the lab rat is really harmless, why not test him in a cage where alcohol, noise, and ego strip away control? We watch Doakes pick the arena with precision. It's not an office, not a briefing room, not a crime scene with internal affairs hovering. It's a crowded bar, music pounding, cops blowing off steam, a place where a shove or a raised voice won't trigger paperwork, just cheers. To keep this clear, Doakes is creating conditions, not chaos. He's building a pressure chamber around Dexter's persona to see what leaks out. He closes distance. He crowds Dexter's personal space. He throws out those cutting lines about Dexter being a freak, about the way he watches people, about the dead eyes behind the polite smile. No pretense of workplace professionalism, no plausible deniability, just naked hostility framed as blowing off steam. The focus is not just on the insults themselves, but on the way Doakes uses the crowd as a weapon. Other cops are watching. Laughter ripples. Every second Dexter refuses to react makes him look weaker, smaller, more suspicious. And this is where the mask starts to shake. We get rapid flashes in our head of earlier scenes. Dexter charming Masuka, doting on Rita, playing the affable lab tech at morning briefings. Then we cut back to the bar, to clenched fists, to that tiny twitch in Dexter's jaw. Along the way, the show is telling us something crucial about his psychology. The performance can withstand scrutiny. It cannot withstand humiliation. Dexter makes a split-second decision. He hits back. Hard, the move is fast, efficient, and vicious, in a way no nonviolent blood spatter analyst should be. The central question for Doakes has never been, is Dexter weird? It's, is he dangerous? In that instant, he gets his answer. That one burst of violence is a confession in a language only a soldier and a predator share. From Doakes' perspective, the plan works perfectly. He pushed, the fade cracked, and something feral looked back at him. From Dexter's perspective, it's a catastrophic failure. His entire Season 1 trajectory has been about staying invisible, letting the code and the cover story do the work. Now, in front of half the squad, he's shown a flash of the thing he swore would never surface in daylight. After the bar fight, their relationship changes category. This isn't just a hostile coworker anymore. This is open war. Doakes shifts from passive surveillance to active hunting. Dexter, meanwhile, silently rewrites his internal rulebook. Doakes isn't just an obstacle to evade. He's a trigger that can make the dark passenger lunge without a plan. And that volatility will matter when the Bay Harbor Butcher case stops being abstract and Doakes decides to follow him into the dark for real. Once Doakes shifts into active hunting, the next move is brutal in its simplicity. He just never lets Dexter out of his sight. No warrant, no task force, just one sergeant in a car, turning his suspicion into a full-time shadow. This isn't an investigation so much as an obsession, and it lives in the gray area where departmental rules get very flexible when you think you've sniffed out a monster. Doakes starts parking across from Dexter's place, idling outside Rita's house, appearing at crime scenes he doesn't need to be at. To keep this clear, he's not building a formal case. He's building a pattern. When does Dexter leave? How long is he gone? Why do his late nights at the lab never quite line up with actual lab work? The central question for Doakes isn't, is Dexter weird? Anymore, it's what is he hiding that requires this much control? And that's exactly where we see a crucial operational failure. Dexter plans a textbook kill night, target vetted by the code, plastic ready, boat prepped, alibi loosely set with Rita. We watch him slip into the car, the ritual already calming his nerves, the dark passenger humming along with the engine. Then he checks the rearview mirror. Headlights, the same sedan. Doakes' face just visible in the glow of the dashboard. In this video, we're going to keep returning to moments like this, because they show how fragile Dexter's supposed mastery really is. One car in the mirror, and the entire ritual collapses. He can't grab the target. He can't scout the dump site. He can't even circle the block without that presence behind him turning every turn into evidence. If Dexter peels off toward an industrial park at midnight, what does that tell a cop who already thinks he's a killer? So he improvises. He reroutes to a crowded diner, forcing Doakes to follow him into public instead of into the dark. He stalls with coffee he doesn't want, food he doesn't need, a fake casualness that reads as strain to anyone paying attention. Then comes the damage control at home, another lie to Rita about overtime, another thin story that doesn't quite match the fatigue in his eyes. The kill is abandoned. The plan is ash. Psychologically, this is devastating. The ritual that usually soothes him now becomes a minefield. Every step, wrapping tools, loading the boat, even checking the tide charts, feels like it could be watched, recorded, interrupted. The kill room used to be the one place where Dexter's rules held. Now the real rule is Doakes' rule. You are never alone. How do you maintain the code when you can't even guarantee privacy? The focus is not just on the missed body on the table. It's on the way Dexter is forced into permanent reactive mode, adjusting routes, fabricating alibis on the fly, tracking Doakes' schedule instead of his own quarry. Doakes doesn't have to kick down a plastic-covered door to win. He just has to be close enough that Dexter starts second-guessing every move. And as Dexter finally drives home from that failed hunt, watching Doakes' headlights peel off in the opposite direction, we feel the real threat settling in. This time, he saw the tail. What happens the night he doesn't? That split in the road isn't just a visual. It's Dexter's whole problem in late season 1. 2 sets of headlights coming for him from opposite directions. And no safe lane to occupy. On one side, Brian, as the ice truck killer, is escalating the performance. Blood-drained bodies posed in crime scenes tailored to Dexter's childhood. The prosthetic hand in Dexter's freezer. The hotel room painted in Dexter's mother's blood. These aren't just clues in an investigation. They're invitations, taunts. A theatrical obsession designed to pull Dexter out of the role of quiet technician and into the spotlight as a fellow predator. On the other side, Doakes is doing the exact opposite kind of hunting. No messages, no puzzles, no grand reveals, just a man watching another man, clocking every off reaction, every missing beat of normal human grief or fear. To keep this clear, the show gives us 2 parallel tracks, Brian leaving Dexter gifts like a twisted secret admirer, and Doakes building a silent, methodical case entirely in his own head. In this video, we're going to sit with that squeeze point, because the central question in this stretch isn't just will Dexter catch the ice truck killer? It's can Dexter move toward his brother without exposing himself to the only cop who already smells blood? Every time Dexter follows Brian's trail, he has to factor in Doakes' shadow. Every crime scene is double-loaded. What is Brian saying to Dexter? And what is Dexter accidentally saying to Doakes by how he reacts? Watch how the logistics collapse. Dexter wants to examine the ice truck killer's work for personal meaning, but Doakes is right there, clocking the way Dexter lingers. Dexter wants to sneak off to chase a lead, but Doakes has already decided the lab geek doesn't get to wander. Stalk the target, control the environment, leave no evidence. That's the plan. Instead, Dexter is stuck explaining his movements to a man who doesn't believe a single word. The irony is brutal. The more Dexter tries to stop a serial killer, the more he looks like one to Doakes. He's late. He's distracted. He has emotional blind spots the size of a kill room. From the outside, that's not the profile of a heroic blood spatter analyst. It's the profile of someone hiding a second life. And Doakes, with his black ops background and trauma-hardened psychology, is uniquely built to read those tells without needing proof on paper. The focus is not just on the external investigation, it's on the internal pressure cooker. Dexter's code says the ice truck killer has to be stopped. His survival instinct says Doakes has to be avoided. What happens when those directives collide in the same night, the same alleyway, the same body on a table? Along the way, the series quietly locks in a paradox that will define Dexter's trajectory. The only cop close to the real monster is chasing the wrong one, and that wrong one is our protagonist. And as Brian's messages get louder and Doakes' suspicion gets quieter but sharper, we're pushed toward the next inevitable step. What happens when one of those hunters finally catches Dexter in the act? So when we hit the end of season 1, Brian isn't the only one circling Dexter. In the background, there's another hunter tightening his net, one who doesn't need childhood trauma clues or doll parts in a freezer. Doakes is building a case made entirely of behavior. Let's kick things off with that mental file he's been compiling since episode 1. The bar fight, where Dexter drops that gang member with way too much precision for a lab tech. The way Dexter never flinches at mutilated bodies, while everyone else in Homicide looks at least vaguely human. The late nights, the unexplained absences, the evasive answers whenever anyone asks where he was. To keep this clear, Doakes doesn't see a meek blood spatter analyst. He sees a man who is always, somehow, adjacent to violence. That's why those early confrontations land so hard. In the hallway, at crime scenes, in the parking lot, Doakes keeps stepping into Dexter's space and stripping away the harmless persona. "I know you," he insists, long before he has language for what that knowing actually is. The central question for Doakes isn't, is Dexter weird? It's what kind of predator hides this well inside a police department. He can't say serial killer yet, but he can say dangerous, and he says it out loud, repeatedly, while everyone else laughs it off. Along the way, the investigation into the ice truck killer keeps throwing Dexter into the orbit of every major crime scene. Dexter at the hospital. Dexter at the crime scene where Doakes' own past in Haiti gets dragged into the open. Dexter conveniently present when things escalate. From Doakes' perspective, that's not coincidence, that's pattern. His military and black ops background teach him to trust pattern over charm. So he tails Dexter. He watches his car. He notes the way Dexter's eyes go flat when there's blood on the floor. What happens when instinct won't let you look away, but evidence refuses to cooperate? And that's the bind. Institutionally, Doakes has nothing. No body that points back to Dexter, no weapon, no witness, just a stack of moments that, on paper, look like workplace harassment from an angry sergeant. The focus is not just on Doakes' suspicion, but on the way the system quietly punishes that suspicion. LaGuarta pulls him off. Colleagues roll their eyes. Official channels close down. So his pursuit has to go off the books, fueled by rage, intuition, and personal obsession. Dexter survives this phase not because his plan is flawless, but because Doakes is still missing that single crucial piece. A corpse that screams this was Dexter, not just Dexter was nearby. Season 1 ends with Brian exposed and dead. The ice truck case closed. And Miami Metro ready to move on. But Doakes doesn't move on. His file on Dexter is still open, still growing, still one body short of confirmation. So what happens in Season 2 when the Bay Harbor butcher investigation finally hands Doakes that missing piece? Season 2 answers that question with a splash of black water and metal barrels. Divers surface off the Miami coast, hauling up Dexter's past. Literally, the private game between one suspicious sergeant and one supposedly harmless blood guy explodes into a citywide manhunt for the Bay Harbor butcher. From boats circling the dump site to LaGuarta and Lundy locking down the task force, the scale changes overnight. Dexter's ocean, which he treated as the final safeguard in his plan, becomes Exhibit A in a federal investigation. And in the middle of that frenzy, Doakes is watching the evidence board the way he's been watching Dexter since Season 1. To keep this clear, the show doesn't just widen the scope, it retroactively vindicates his instincts. Every weird moment we've already seen starts to snap into focus for him. Dexter disappearing from crime scenes, the way he stares at blood a little too long. The night Doakes tails him and finds him dumping something in the ocean. Back then, those were fragments feeding a vague sense that Dexter was wrong, dangerous, off. Now the task force is describing a meticulous killer who dismembers victims, drains blood, and disposes of bodies offshore. That's not just a profile. For Doakes, that's a pattern that looks exactly like Dexter's shadow. This is where Doakes' energy shifts. Early on, his hostility feels almost personal, like a clash of temperaments and trauma histories. He's the blunt instrument, Dexter is the quiet scalpel, and they grate on each other. But once the barrels come up, we move from simmering distrust to urgent conviction. The central question in his mind stops being, what's wrong with this guy? And becomes, how do I prove he's the butcher before he slips away? The monster he's been circling might actually be the monster everyone is hunting, and that realization locks him in. Along the way, the focus is not just on Doakes being right, it's on how dangerous it is, in this world, to be right about Dexter. Because as Doakes leans in, Dexter's illusion of control fractures. He's no longer dodging one angry cop at the margins of cases. He's trying to stay invisible inside an investigation that is literally built out of his ritual, his tools, his tides, his code of selection. In this video, we're going to keep tracking that trajectory, because this is the operational nightmare Dexter never planned for. The institution he hides inside turns its spotlight directly onto his methods, and the one man who never bought the mask is now emotionally invested in winning. The consequences are immediate: tighter surveillance, fewer exits, more pressure on every lie. And as Doakes follows that pressure all the way to a cabin in the Everglades, we'll see how his obsession becomes the final threat Dexter can't outthink without rewriting the story of the Bay Harbor Butcher itself. So when Doakes follows that pressure all the way to the Everglades, the real break doesn't start at the cabin. It starts in a fluorescent lit lab, in the quiet moment where he finally steps into Dexter's world without permission. No witnesses, no backup, just a cop, a hunch, and a keycard. Let's kick things off with the image. Doakes moving through Miami Metro after hours, the building that's supposed to represent law and order suddenly framed like a crime scene. He slips into Dexter's lab, that sanctuary we've seen 100 times as the backdrop for jokes and blood reports, and now every beaker and microscope feels like camouflage. He doesn't know what he's looking for, but he knows it's there. Drawers open, cabinets slam softly. We watch him move with that special forces efficiency, systematic, controlled, predatory, and then he finds it. The modest wooden box tucked away, out of sight but not out of reach. He opens it, and those glass rectangles catch the light. Blood slides, neatly labeled, meticulously arranged. From a distance, they're just lab artifacts. In his hands, they feel like something else entirely. This is the first time a piece of Dexter's true self physically leaves his control. The central question isn't just, will this expose him? It's, what does it mean when the ritual object of a secret life is suddenly in someone else's grip? The focus is not just on evidence, it's on identity. Those slides are Dexter's private liturgy: stalk, confront, kill, collect. They're how he proves to himself that the code is working, that his plan is coherent, that his darkness is contained. And now, that darkness is portable. It fits in Doakes' pocket. To keep this clear, Doakes doesn't fully understand what he's holding. He's not instantly mapping each slide to a missing person. But his psychology is sharp enough to register the wrongness. Why would a blood spatter analyst keep a hidden box of preserved blood? Why hide it at all? Instinct tells him this is the pattern he's been chasing, the tangible thread that connects Dexter's dead-eyed calm to the unease in his gut since episode 1. So he makes a decision that breaks procedure and confirms his obsession. He takes the box and walks out. No log, no chain of custody, no witnesses. Operationally, this is a catastrophic failure for Dexter. His whole trajectory up to this point has depended on total environmental control. He kills off the grid, dumps in the ocean, and keeps his trophies in a space only he touches. Now the trophies are evidence in motion. He isn't just hiding behavior anymore. He has to recover or neutralize physical artifacts that directly tie him to dozens of murders. How do you plan for that when you don't even know which direction they've gone? In this video, we're going to keep returning to this pattern, the moment Dexter's sacred objects become someone else's leverage. Because as Doakes drives away with that box, Dexter is left staring at an empty hiding place, realizing a part of his secret life is literally in transit, and for the first time, he has no idea who is really in control. So when Doakes drives away with that box, he doesn't go to La Guerta. He doesn't go to Lundy. He goes off the grid. That choice matters. The one cop who has been screaming about Dexter from day one suddenly decides the official investigation can't be trusted with the most important evidence of his career. To keep this clear, Doakes understands the stakes. If he walks into Miami Metro holding Dexter's blood slides, he tips off everyone, including the very man he thinks might be the Bay Harbor butcher. So instead, he makes a different plan. Anonymous phone calls, a quiet appointment, a nondescript private lab where nobody knows his badge number, only his cash. We can almost see the montage, slides sealed in evidence bags, a gloved hand labeling them, a centrifuge spinning. Cut back to Dexter at Miami Metro, doing his usual routine, running tests, cracking dry jokes, believing that as long as he controls the science, he controls the story. In this video, we're going to keep returning to that illusion, because here the illusion is already dying and Dexter doesn't even feel it yet. The results come in, and this is where the weird little wooden box stops being eccentric and becomes lethal. The lab tech doesn't see a narrative, just numbers and matches. Multiple slides correlate with tissue samples from known Bay Harbor butcher victims. Different names, different crime scenes. The same careful drop of blood preserved like a trophy, every single time. This is ritual, quantified, a pattern you can print out. The central question for Doakes is no longer, is Dexter off? It's, how many bodies is this man standing on? When those reports hit his hands, he's not chasing a hunch anymore. He's holding a forensic map of a serial killer's psychology and routine. And here's the real inversion. From a syringe sinking into the wrong neck to a body weighted for the ocean, Dexter has always believed his command of blood and trace evidence is what keeps him ahead. Now that same expertise has betrayed him. The blood slides are literally his own lab work turned inside out, weaponized against him by someone who doesn't even fully grasp how damning they are yet. This is a structural failure in Dexter's entire code. Harry taught him that science plus discipline equals safety. But the focus is not just on the fact that Doakes has evidence. It's that the very system Dexter built to reassure himself is now the clearest proof that his life is a lie. The investigation has caught up not through intuition alone, but through the cold, indifferent logic of lab results. Along the way, Doakes' mindset shifts into something we've never seen pointed at Dexter before. Absolute certainty. No more something's wrong with you. No more shadowing him around crime scenes, waiting for a slip. Doakes now knows. And that knowledge makes him more dangerous than any target Dexter has ever stalked. How do you outmaneuver a hunter who finally has both instinct and documentation on his side? Each major section will keep escalating this, but here the trajectory bends. As Dexter goes about his day, we cut back to Doakes locking those reports away, planning his next move. The clock has started. Science has spoken. And for the first time, Dexter Morgan is no longer just hiding from people. He's hiding from the truth written in his own blood, from fluorescent lab light to swamp haze, from tidy reports to sawgrass and mud. The investigation that started on paper follows Dexter all the way out to the Everglades, where the evidence finally grows a voice and a gun. This is where Doakes stops circling and actually pounces. Let's kick things off by setting that physical isolation, because it mirrors Dexter's psychological corner. No Miami traffic, no bullpen noise, just water, insects, and the sense that whatever happens out here will never make it back to civilization intact. Doakes has followed Dexter, not on a hunch this time, but with the blood slide box in his back pocket. The concrete link between the Bay Harbor butcher case and the harmless blood guy who's been standing next to him at crime scenes since season 1. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to these moments where the illusion of control just evaporates, and this confrontation is the template. Doakes steps out with his gun drawn, and the rhythm is different immediately. No banter. No surprise mother, meme energy. He is calm, precise, and absolutely sure. He calls Dexter what he is. Killer, Bay Harbor butcher. The central question lands. What do you do when the story you've told yourself about being untouchable is spoken back to you, word for word, by the man aiming at your chest? Beat by beat, we watch Dexter try the old tools. He deflects. He leans on the lab tech persona. He acts offended that Doakes would even suggest it. But the power has shifted. Doakes has the slides. Doakes has the pattern. Doakes has the moral high ground of a cop who, for once, is not compromised by friendship or charm. To keep this clear, the focus is not just on the gun, it's on language. Hearing Bay Harbor Butcher directed at him, not as a headline, but as an accusation, strips away Dexter's internal distance. The mask doesn't crack because of volume. It cracks because someone finally names his private mythology. So why doesn't Dexter kill him? Operationally, the plan almost writes itself. Isolate, neutralize, dispose. The code could be stretched to fit. Doakes is a threat. A danger to Dexter's continued existence. Yet Dexter hesitates. He drugs, imprisons, stalls, because on some level, he knows this isn't a typical target. Doakes is innocent of the crimes that justified Dexter's table, and killing him would mean admitting the code was never about justice, only self-preservation. That's the line he can't quite cross yet. Along the way, that hesitation becomes the fatal crack. By refusing to resolve the situation cleanly, Dexter creates a prolonged hostage scenario, invites Leela into the mess, and sets up the catastrophic scapegoating that will define the rest of the Bay Harbor Butcher arc. Doakes walks away from this first Everglades confrontation alive, armed with proof and certainty. How long can a man like that walk around with the truth before the whole construct finally detonates? Doakes walks away from that cabin in the Everglades with blood on his face and certainty in his eyes, and something fundamental shifts. Up to this point, Dexter has been playing defense. Now he realizes defense is a plan for people who still have time. He doesn't. The moment Doakes has the slides, the game changes. Passive evasion, clever excuses, the harmless lab rat act, none of that can erase physical evidence. Doakes has conviction, he has momentum, and he has a story that finally makes sense of every weird thing Dexter has ever done. The investigation is no longer a background threat, it's a loaded gun slowly rotating toward him. Dexter's illusion of control cracks, and we watch him do the one thing Harry's code never really prepared him for: sustained counter-surveillance against someone who is actually innocent. To keep this clear, look at how methodical he becomes. Dexter starts tracking Doakes the way he tracks a target. Gym routines, driving routes, stakeout patterns outside his apartment. He studies Doakes' temper, clocking every emotional trigger: LaGuardia, family, the Bay Harbor Butcher Task Force, and files them away as leverage. Stalk the target, confirm the habits, anticipate the reaction. It's the same ritual he uses on killers, just redirected at the one cop who has been right about him from day one. And that's the paradox hook at the heart of this phase. The serial killer, who only kills killers, is now blueprinting a cop's death in the name of the code. What does self-defense mean when the person hunting you is correct? The central question isn't just will Dexter get away with it, but what does he have to become? to get away with it. Along the way, the line between evasion and premeditated murder thins to almost nothing. We can feel the ethical tension grinding underneath every calculated move. Harry's code is supposed to be a boundary. Only those who slip through the system. Only those the law can't or won't touch. Doakes is the system. He's the one person at Miami Metro who refuses to be charmed, refuses to be compromised, refuses to look away. Killing him wouldn't be a righteous correction. It would be an execution of the truth itself. So why is Dexter still drawing up contingency plans that all end in plastic and a bay? This is where the trajectory of the whole series darkens. In this video, we're going to keep tracking these inflection points, but here, with Doakes, the collapse is specific and chilling. To preserve a secret identity built on a broken code, Dexter is seriously considering murdering the only honest cop in the building. That's not a side quest. That's a moral point of no return. Each major section will show Dexter's plans failing in different ways. But this one is special because, on paper, nothing has failed yet. The cover is still intact. The task force is still guessing. And yet, inside Dexter, something has already given way. Once he accepts that killing Doakes is on the table, what won't be on the table next season? And once that thought is on the table, Dexter does something very Dexter. He looks for a procedural workaround. If killing Doakes is the moral line, maybe he can design a plan that removes him without blood. On paper, it sounds almost elegant. In practice, it's the first big step toward the Bay Harbor Butcher disaster. Let's kick things off with what Dexter actually tries to do. He doesn't go straight for a frame job as the butcher. He goes for something smaller, more reasonable. Make Doakes look like an unstable cop. Plant a seed here, an incident there, and let Doakes' own rage do most of the work. The psychology is brutal. Dexter knows exactly which buttons to press, because he's been watching Doakes watch him. We see him engineer proximity and pressure. Dexter leaks just enough suspicious behavior to keep Doakes tailing him, then make sure there are witnesses when Doakes explodes. A shove in a hallway, a threat in the bullpen. That scene where Doakes attacks Dexter in front of the entire department. Concrete image after concrete image of a sergeant losing control. To keep this clear, Dexter's goal isn't evidence of a crime, it's evidence of temperament. He wants Doakes labeled a liability. The staged drug bust is the centerpiece. Dexter tips off a deal, manipulates the timing, and makes sure Doakes is the one who walks in hot. Guns up, adrenaline spiking, suspects on edge. Dexter holds back, literally and figuratively, letting Doakes charge forward and escalate. When it blows up, it looks like exactly what Dexter designed. A cop who can't de-escalate. A man whose special forces trauma is leaking into his badge. Operationally, the plan works. Doakes is pushed toward suspension. His gun and badge stripped. His reputation inside Miami Metro cracked. The focus is not just on getting Doakes out of Dexter's way. It's on doing it in a way that lets Dexter keep believing he's different. He's not killing an innocent man. He's just nudging an unfit cop off the board. The central question, though, is what does that nudge actually do to the larger trajectory of the investigation? In this video, we're going to keep coming back to this pattern. Dexter reaching for a half measure to protect his code and accidentally creating a bigger threat. Sidelining Doakes looks like control. No more surprise interrogations at crime scenes, no more eyes on his blood work, no more instinctive, I see you from across the lab. But the consequences are immediate and vicious. Once Doakes is off the force, he's off the leash. No chain of command, no paperwork, no IA breathing down his neck. The same Black Ops skill set that made him valuable to Miami Metro is now pointed entirely at Dexter, without supervision, without rules. Is it any surprise that this is when he starts digging into the Bay Harbor butcher case on his own terms, following Dexter outside the system, and ultimately catching him in the act? Dexter thought he had contained the threat. What he actually did was free it. And now, with nothing left to lose, Doakes is more dangerous, more relentless, and more determined than ever to bring him down alone. Dexter thought he had contained the threat. What he actually did was free it. Suspension doesn't break Doakes, it clarifies him. When he's stripped of his badge, we watch a man who already distrusted the system decide that this is proof the system can't be trusted at all. In that moment, the loss of institutional power becomes a kind of dark promotion. No more reports, no more chain of command, no more IA breathing down his neck. Doakes reads his exile as confirmation that the investigation is compromised, that someone inside Miami Metro is protecting the Bay Harbor butcher, and that the only way to regain control is to operate completely alone. It's not a defeat in his psychology, it's a green light. So he pivots. Instantly, the cop schedule disappears and is replaced by a single, brutal plan: Dexter, 24/7. We get those images of Doakes idling in his car outside Dexter's apartment, following his SUV through Miami nights, watching him run errands that never quite add up. To keep this clear, this isn't casual tailing anymore, it's a siege. No shifts, no backup, just a man with special forces, training, and a grudge, tracking every move Dexter makes. And because he's no longer writing things down, he starts seeing what other cops miss. The late nights that don't match Dexter's lab hours, the way the Bay Harbor butcher dumps stop when Dexter is visibly rattled, the coincidence of Dexter being present, physically or forensically, at key crime scenes tied to the case. From a distance, he's assembling a pattern that the official task force, buried in paperwork and politics, never really sees. What if the one person closest to the truth is the only one barred from the investigation? Here's where the irony cuts in. The more Doakes is punished for being right, the more he starts to resemble the very criminals he hunts. He breaks into Dexter's place. He steals blood slides. He stalks, surveils, and ambushes. He's working off instinct and rage rather than warrants and procedure. The focus is not just on his suspicion, but on how his methods slide, inch by inch, into the same extralegal territory Dexter has lived in for years. In this video, we're going to keep returning to this mirror effect. Dexter has a code, rituals, and a story about necessary killing. Doakes has training, trauma, and a story about necessary force. Both men believe the rules have failed. Both believe only they can correct that failure. Along the way, the show quietly collapses the distance between hunter and hunted. This exile phase is what makes their final collision inevitable. By the time Doakes actually catches Dexter in the act at the cabin, it isn't a cop arresting a suspect. It's one outlaw confronting another, each convinced he's the only one who truly understands what the other is. Two men, off the grid, off the badge, and far past the point where the system can save either of them. And once they're both outside the rules, the question isn't who solves the case. The central question becomes, who survives the consequences when their plans finally collide? Once those plans collide, Dexter makes a choice that tells us everything about his illusion of control. He doesn't run. He doesn't kill Doakes. He builds a box in the woods and decides he can keep a human being inside it indefinitely. The cabin is more than a location. It's Dexter trying to step outside civilization itself. No witnesses, no cameras, no jurisdiction. It's off the grid in every sense, a place he's already used as a kill site precisely because it sits beyond the reach of any investigation. To keep this clear, this isn't some spontaneous hideout. It's a carefully selected pressure valve, a last resort solution for a problem he has convinced himself he can't solve the usual way. And that problem is Doakes. Dexter's psychology hits a paradox. He can't live with killing the one cop who was right about him from day one. But he also can't live with that same cop walking back into Miami Metro and telling the world what he saw. So he invents a third option. Not execution, not freedom. Containment on paper, it looks like a compromise. In practice, it's a morally and practically unstable plan that depends on everything going perfectly forever. When has that ever happened in Dexter's life? Watch how he prepares the space. Plastic, chains, locks, but no kill table, no trophies, no ritual. He stocks food and water. He brings in the blood slides to show Doakes the logic of the code, as if explanation can domesticate the horror of what he's done. The focus is not just on the logistics of imprisonment, it's on Dexter trying to reframe this as something other than what it is. He tells himself he's buying time. He tells himself he's not crossing a new line. But the moment he turns a kill room into a prison, he's already admitted he can kidnap and cage a man who has never actually broken the law. This is denial weaponized as strategy. Each major section of his life has featured some safeguard he believed would prevent collapse. The code, the slides, the ocean. Now he adds a living, breathing variable locked in a shack in the Everglades. How does he think this ends? Doakes quietly rots away while the Bay Harbor butcher case just fizzles? Deb never notices his absences. No hunter, no hikers, no random patrol ever stumbles across the place. Along the way, the show layers an ominous foreshadowing. Any plan that relies on a secret prisoner, a remote location, and perfect control over every moving part is begging to fail. The weather can change, cars can break down, people can talk. And if Dexter is knocked off balance for even a day, the entire structure collapses. The central question shifts again, not whether he can keep Doakes quiet, but which variable will betray him first. By the time we leave this setup, the cabin is fully staged, chains bolted, supplies stacked, a desperate man locked inside, and an even more desperate man driving back to Miami. Out in those woods, the empty trees surround a box of secrets waiting to explode, and the unspoken question hangs over the next episode like fog. Who will actually die in that cabin? Back in Miami, while that cabin waits like a loaded trap in the woods, the investigation tightens around Dexter's throat. The empty chains we just saw are not hypothetical. They're a destination. And James Doakes is the only one walking directly toward them, with his eyes open. To keep this clear, we need to track Doakes' leverage in this moment. He has the blood slide results, hard science confirming what his instincts have been screaming since episode 1. Dexter is connected to the Bay Harbor butcher. No one else at Miami Metro is willing to connect the dots. LaGuardia defends him, Deb is blind to him. But Doakes has a lab report, a pattern, and that unshakable conviction that this creepy blood guy is not harmless. So he does what no one else will do. He confronts Dexter alone. No backup, no warrant, just a cop willing to bet his life that his read on this man is right. On the other side, Dexter's control is already in visible collapse. The frame job on Doakes has failed. The planted evidence and staged aggression only make Doakes angrier and more certain. Surveillance has flipped. Doakes is tailing Dexter, watching his movements, forcing him to improvise instead of execute a clean plan. And yet, in those woods, the cabin is fully prepared. Plastic sheeting, chains, tools, a place designed not just to hold a body, but to hold a confession, a silent threat waiting to become a system. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to how the show uses structure to expose Dexter's psychology. Here, The cross-cutting is ruthless. We watch Doakes gathering proof, checking records, pushing Lagerda, piecing together the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation, one detail at a time. Cut to Dexter rehearsing abduction scenarios, timing routes, visualizing syringes and choke points. Stalk, isolate, contain. Each major section will jump between these trajectories, and the editing makes it feel less like a chase and more like a collision that has already happened in moral terms. We're just waiting for the physical impact. The central question underneath all this motion is not simply who will win the confrontation. The focus is not just on whether Dexter can neutralize the threat. It's whether the narrative of Dexter can tolerate the existence of one honest cop who knows everything and still survives. What happens to the show if Doakes walks out of that cabin alive, unbroken, and right? Does the fantasy of the code of the righteous serial killer survive that level of exposure? Along the way, the tension becomes almost unbearable because both men think they're closing in on resolution. Doakes believes he's about to expose a monster. Dexter believes he's about to contain a problem. Neither understands that the real plan about to unfold is neither of theirs, and that this showdown will trigger the most tragic misdirection in the entire series. So when they both converge on that Everglades cabin, it feels like the natural endpoint of their investigation. Two men convinced they're closing the loop, but only one of them knows that cabin exists as a plan, a system, a whole off-grid universe built to keep Dexter's secret life untouchable. Dexter thinks he's still steering. He dangles a Bay Harbor Butcher lead, nudges the trail just enough to pull Doakes out of Miami, and heads for the swamp believing he's chosen the battlefield. Remote location, no witnesses, all variables controlled. That's the fantasy. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to that gap between what Dexter thinks he's orchestrating and what the world actually does with his design. Because the cabin isn't just a shack in the trees, it's the physical embodiment of his illusion of control. We're in the deep Everglades, miles from the city, cut off by water and mangrove. No neighbors, no patrol cars, no casual hikers. Inside, everything is engineered for silence, thick walls, sound swallowed by insulation, light blocked out, plastic sheeting folded and ready, tools laid out with surgical neatness, a locked trunk containing his carefully curated evidence cache. This is where the code lives in hardware. To keep this clear, Dexter has built what he thinks is a perfect operational bubble: stalk, abduct, transport, eliminate, dispose, no loose ends, no observers. But when he's on the way, thinking he's arriving first, Doakes is already there, moving like the soldier he used to be. He doesn't wander in, he clears it. Corners checked, weapon up, breathing measured. The psychology of that entrance matters. Doakes is trained to see incongruity, and everything in this place screams it. What is a harmless blood spatter guy doing with a black ops torture shed in the swamp? Why the restraints? Why the industrial plastic? Why the locked containers? Each object is a failure of Dexter's cover story. Each detail is a crack in the persona that fooled everyone else. Then we hit the most important image. The blood slides in Doakes' hands. He finds the box, opens it, and the camera lingers on his face as the horror lands in stages. First, confusion at the meticulous order. Then recognition as he reads the labels, case numbers, victim names. These aren't souvenirs from some classified mission in Haiti. They're trophies from Miami Metro investigations, from their cases, from his own crime scenes. This is the first time in the entire series that someone stands inside Dexter's faux kill infrastructure and actually understands what it means. No guesses, no hunches, no metaphor. The whole trajectory of seasons 1 and 2 collapses into a single, silent realization: the Bay Harbor Butcher is not an abstraction. He's their coworker. And with that, the power flips. The cabin designed to neutralize victims instantly becomes the crime scene that can neutralize Dexter. For once, he is the one who's been lured. Doakes is now the first living witness to the totality of Dexter's system, armed not just with suspicion, but with documented reality. So, when Dexter finally arrives, oblivious that his sanctum has been breached, the central question shifts. It's no longer can he dodge an investigation, it's can he survive a world where his worst truths are already in someone else's hands? From this point on, evasion is dead. The only options left are containment or catastrophe, and the next move will decide which one the story chooses. Dexter opens that cabin door, expecting routine, a controlled environment, a familiar ritual, another night where the code keeps his double life neatly separated. Instead, the air is wrong. The light is wrong. The silence is wrong. His plan depends on repetition, on predictability, and in one step across that threshold he feels it, something has already broken. To keep this clear, the scene is staged like a reversal of every kill room we've watched so far. Dexter moves in cautiously, eyes scanning the plastic, the tools, the table. This is his church, his office, his illusion of control made visible. But before he can reset, before he can convince himself this is just nerves, Doakes steps out of the shadows with his gun raised, and Dexter's blood slides in his hand. The investigation has literally walked into the kill room. Doakes doesn't hedge. He doesn't speculate. He names it. Bay Harbor Butcher. He runs through the pattern, the missing criminals, the ocean dumps, the forensic tech who always happens to be there. This isn't a hunch anymore. It's a closing argument delivered at gunpoint. And because those slides are glinting between his fingers, because the tools and plastic and restraints are all around them, the room itself becomes corroborating testimony. Watch what fails first. Dexter reaches for his usual defenses, the awkward laugh, the feigned confusion, the claim that this is all a misunderstanding. Those tricks worked on Lagerta, on Deb, on an entire department that liked the harmless blood guy. Here, nothing lands. Doakes has cataloged every strange absence, every crime scene coincidence, every dead gangster with Dexter in the vicinity. The psychology he's reading is not Dexter's performance, it's the predator underneath. And that's where Doakes' moral framework snaps into focus. He's furious, disgusted, but there's also this grim relief in Eric King's performance. For 2 seasons, his instincts have been screaming that something about Dexter is wrong. Now, the mask is gone, and the monster has a body, a name, a ritual space. The thing that made him the problem cop is suddenly his greatest clarity. He was right. From Dexter's side, we can feel the recalculation in real time. This is not a sloppy killer he can gaslight, not a coworker he can emotionally manipulate. This is a special forces operator who understands operational patterns, who has already mapped Dexter's methods and, more dangerously, his psychology. How do you negotiate with the only cop who doesn't want an explanation, only an end? The physicality locks that in. Doakes' stance is pure military, feet planted, arms steady, every muscle ready for recoil. Dexter goes unnervingly still, predatory, as if movement might acknowledge guilt. Around them, the plastic sheets, the drain, the knives, all silently confirm Doakes' accusations. Even if Dexter never spoke, the room has already confessed. In this video, we're going to keep returning to this confrontation because it crystallizes the central question of the entire series. What happens when someone who actually deserves to know the truth finally gets it? No more hints, no more near misses, just the serial killer and the cop who solved him, face to face. And the paradox? is brutal. The more honest this moment becomes, the fewer options Dexter has. The standoff ends the scene unresolved. No body, no arrest, but it's irreversible. Doakes can't unknow what he's seen. Dexter can't go back to pretending the investigation is abstract. From here on, his entire life depends on what he does with the only man who ever saw him clearly. And the next step will drag both of them past any point of return. Dexter has the gun. Doakes is on the ground. For the first time, the physical balance finally matches the psychological one we've been watching all season. The hunter is technically in control. And yet, in the one moment where his usual plan would be brutally simple, everything stalls. We watch the mechanics first. The lunge, the struggle in the cabin, the gun knocked free, Dexter using leverage and calm where Doakes uses fury. This is exactly the kind of situation where he normally reaches for a syringe, plastic sheeting, a rehearsed speech. Stalk the target, confirm the victims, prepare the kill room. The ritual is second nature. With Doakes disarmed and isolated, he could apply that routine in minutes. No witnesses, no investigation, no loose end. But he doesn't. The reason is the code. Harry's voice is louder in that cabin than Doakes' shouting. Dexter has never had a clearer, more inconvenient example of a man who is dangerous, violent, and yet fundamentally outside his rules. Doakes has killed in combat. He's broken bones, fired shots, probably carried out Black Ops executions in Haiti. But he is not a predator stalking innocents for pleasure. He is not a Bay Harbor butcher. And Dexter knows it. To keep this clear, this is the first time Harry's code doesn't just limit Dexter's options, it actively endangers his survival. Up to now, the code has been framed as a shield. It protects him from sloppy failure, from getting caught, from becoming Brian. Here, that same rule set corners him. Kill Doakes, and he lives, but betrays the one principle that lets him believe he's different from the monsters he hunts. Spare Doakes, and he honors the code, but he keeps alive the only man who can destroy him. So he does what Dexter always does. When control slips, he starts rationalizing. Maybe he can contain Doakes. Maybe he can stall for time, find a way to frame him, redirect the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation without crossing the line into killing an innocent. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to this pattern, because the focus is not just on what Dexter does, but on how he talks himself into believing each messy workaround is still part of a coherent plan. Doakes' badge makes it even messier. On paper, yes, he's killed. But those deaths sit inside a different moral category: sanctioned violence, combat, split-second decisions. Dexter's psychology depends on that distinction. If he blurs it now, if has killed becomes enough, then every cop who's ever fired a weapon is fair game. That's not a tweak to the code, that's a collapse of the entire system Harry built. And here's the irony. The one time Dexter tries to be more ethical, to respect the letter of the code even when it terrifies him, he creates the exact conditions for an innocent man to die for his crimes. By choosing imprisonment over execution, by locking Doakes in that cabin instead of wrapping it in plastic, he trades a clean. Final solution for a volatile hostage scenario he cannot fully control. Each major section will show this same trajectory, a moment where Dexter could end the threat, a hesitation that feels humane, and consequences that spiral far past what he imagined. Along the way, Doakes will become the largest single casualty of Dexter's attempt to be better. And the match that finally ignites that powder keg, she hasn't even walked into the story yet. We cut from the theoretical to the brutally literal: a shack in the Everglades, a pair of handcuffs, and James Doakes chained to the wall like evidence Dexter can't quite bring himself to destroy. This is Dexter's plan for containment made physical. No ocean. No plastic-wrapped tableau. Just a kill room stretched past its design limits. The logistics are ugly. Rusted bed frame as anchor point. Heavy cuffs biting into Doakes' wrists. A cage improvised from lumber and chicken wire so Dexter can leave him secured while he goes back to Miami Metro, back to the Bay Harbor butcher investigation he's secretly sabotaging. Food dropped off in Tupperware. Water in plastic jugs. A remote swamp that swallows screams and cell signals. To keep this clear, Dexter is trying to turn a single-use murder ritual into a long-term holding facility, and the system is already creaking. But Doakes doesn't respond like a victim waiting for execution. He responds like an interrogator who's finally trapped his suspect. No pleading, no flattery, no bargaining, just relentless questions. Why do you kill? How many? Who decides they deserve it? Every time Dexter checks the cuffs or changes the bandages, Doakes is right there, drilling into the psychology behind the code Harry built. If Harry's rules are so righteous, why does Dexter have to hide them in a swamp? In this video, we're going to keep coming back to these conversations, because this is where the quiet part gets dragged out into daylight. Dexter explains selection criteria like he's lecturing in a forensics lab. Solid evidence, repeat offenders, people who slipped through the cracks. Doakes won't let him stop there. He calls out the confirmation bias, the God complex, the thrill. The focus is not just on Dexter's words, but on the way he keeps glancing at his tools, at the door, anywhere but Doakes' eyes. For once, the monster has a live, conscious audience. That's the role reversal. Normally, Dexter's kill spaces are temples of control. Stalk the target. Confirm the victims. Prepare the kill room. Leave no evidence. Here, he's improvising. He has to manage a conscious, combative, morally outraged witness who keeps insisting on a different narrative. You're not a necessary evil. You're a predator hiding behind a badge. How do you maintain the illusion of control when the person you've caged refuses to play along? Doakes' moral clarity becomes its own form of pressure. He never says, "I understand." He never suggests a partnership. He calls Dexter a psychopath to his face and insists that even if every name on those blood slides is guilty, the killings are still murder. That refusal to compromise is new for Dexter. He's used to people either not seeing him at all or, later, half accepting the code as a lesser evil. Doakes offers no such comfort. And because Doakes is innocent of the butcher murders, the consequences cut deeper. Dexter's usual victims vanish quickly. The guilt is abstract, managed through ritual. Here, the suffering is prolonged. The smell of sweat in the cabin, the sound of chains when Doakes shifts. Each return trip is a reminder that Dexter is framing a colleague, a soldier, a man who was right about him from day one. The central question becomes unavoidable. If the code leads here, what is it actually protecting? Along the way, the cabin itself turns into a metaphor for Dexter's entire life strategy. He's always believed he can box his darkness in, keep it away from Deb, from Rita, from Miami. Now that darkness has a name and a badge number and is literally locked in a compartment, he has to service like a failing machine. Food is running low. Time is running out. The investigation back home is accelerating. Every lie he tells at the station is tethered to a man in chains in the swamp. The situation cannot hold. The cuffs may be secure, but the plan is not. The longer Doakes stays alive in that cabin, the more unstable every piece of Dexter's world becomes. Someone will notice his absences. Someone will follow the wrong lead. Someone else will walk into that wooden box of secrets. And when they do, the collapse we've been tracking won't be theoretical anymore. It will be waiting for Dexter in the dark, with Doakes' voice still echoing that single damning word, murderer. That murderer doesn't just hang in the air as an insult. In that cabin, it becomes the opening statement of a trial the show has been avoiding since the pilot, James Doakes Cross, examining Dexter Morgan's entire belief system. No jury, no judge, just plastic sheeting, chains, and a cop who refuses to be part of Dexter's fantasy. Let's kick things off with the moment Doakes finally forces Dexter to say the quiet part out loud. Harry's Code. Dexter lays it out like a legal defense. Only people who've killed. Careful investigation. Proof beyond doubt. He leans on the language of rules and control, as if reciting policy makes the knives and garbage bags something other than what they are. And Doakes just laughs. Killing is killing. There's no special category that magically cleans the blood off your hands. To keep this clear, Doakes' argument hits 3 pressure points. First, he calls out Dexter's pleasure. He's watched the comic crime scenes, the way Dexter gravitates to gore, and he says what no one else will. You like this. Second, he strips the only bad guys rule down to what it really is. A story Dexter tells himself so he can keep killing and still sleep at night. Third, he refuses the hero narrative entirely. Soldiers, cops, killers for hire, he's seen all of them. Dexter is not an exception. He's a type. This is where Doakes' own past becomes a weapon. He talks about Haiti, black ops missions, orders that turned into atrocities. He's killed in war, in chaos, under flags and false justifications. But he doesn't walk around pretending it made him righteous. That contrast is brutal. The man with sanctioned blood on his hands is the one insisting there is no moral upgrade for what Dexter does. The central question becomes unavoidable. Is Dexter's code ethics or just branding for his addiction? Watch Dexter's psychology fray here. He's used to 2 responses, awe, like Miguel later, or denial, like Deb. Doakes gives him neither. No fear, no fascination. Just disgust and precise, relentless logic. Every time Dexter tries to reframe himself as a necessary monster, cleaning up the system's failures, Doakes throws the Bay Harbor butcher case back in his face. The city might feel relief. The press might spin a vigilante myth. But that doesn't make Dexter a hero. It makes him a useful horror. Along the way, the show turns that interrogation on us. Haven't we been enjoying the same narrative Dexter uses on himself? We cheer when predators vanish. We admire the plan, the control, the tidy plastic rooms. Doakes is basically asking us, are we rooting for justice or for a charismatic serial killer whose code just happens to align with our fears? And that's the paradoxical thesis of this whole cabin sequence. The closest Dexter ever comes to a real moral trial happens off the books, with the one cop who can't be bought, charmed, or manipulated. Dexter walks out alive. Doakes doesn't. But Dexter's certainty doesn't walk out with him. He clings to the code, yet those questions about pleasure, hypocrisy, and what his killings really mean keep echoing under every plan he makes from this season forward, long after the cabin is ash and the case is closed on the wrong man. Back at Miami Metro, the absence hits before anyone will admit it's a problem. Doakes misses a briefing. He doesn't pick up his phone. A couple of detectives roll their eyes, make a crack about him going off on one of his missions. But beneath the annoyance, we can feel it, the first small ripple of concern in a building that lives on routine. To keep this clear, the collapse starts as a scheduling issue. No shows. Unreturned calls. A chair sitting empty in the bullpen, while the Bay Harbor butcher investigation is supposed to be tightening. The central question isn't, where is Doakes? Yet, it's why is Doakes being Doakes at the worst possible time? And that ambiguity is exactly where Dexter's plan starts to breathe. LaGuerta reads it differently. Where everyone else sees volatility, she sees loyalty. This is the man who backed her plays, who did black ops work in Haiti, and still dragged himself into this fluorescent maze to be a cop. He can be reckless, yes, brutal, absolutely, but vanish without a word while a serial killer case is peaking, that doesn't fit her internal code for who Doakes is. So while the squad shrugs and moves on to the next lead, LaGuerta starts quietly pulling at the thread. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to that split perception, because as the task force digs deeper, they notice something unnerving. Doakes has been chasing the same leads they have, same crime scenes, same victim lists, same late-night file pulls. On paper, it looks like obsession. From our vantage point, we know it's the instinct of the one cop who actually solved the case in his gut. But paper doesn't care about psychology. Paper just shows patterns. Dexter watches all of this like a storm tracker. Every unanswered call to Doakes, every puzzled conversation in the bullpen is proof that the narrative is drifting his way. He doesn't have to push hard. Just a comment here about Doakes' temper. A mention there about his history of going off book. A reminder to Lundy that Special Forces training makes a man capable of things, not accusations. Context, suggestions, the focus is not just on what Dexter says, but on how little he has to say to let institutional bias do the rest. And the cruel irony is that Doakes' competence becomes his noose. His surveillance of Dexter, his independent investigation, his questions about blood slides and boat access, all of that creates a meticulous paper trail that can be reread as a serial killer's ritualistic fixation. Each major section will later be cited: his proximity to key scenes, his aggression, his secrecy. Slowly, the department's machinery finds it convenient to see him as the butcher, while LaGuerta digs in, insisting the man she knows cannot be this monster. A vacuum opens where Doakes used to stand, and Dexter methodically fills it with a story that points an entire city away from him. But what happens when someone refuses to let that vacuum stay filled? That vacuum doesn't stay empty for long, because Dexter makes a decision that changes the entire trajectory of the investigation. If Doakes is already halfway framed by bias and circumstance, why not finish the job? The moment he commits to that plan, every skill we've watched him use to disappear his own crimes gets flipped. The Bay Harbor butcher doesn't vanish anymore. He migrates. Let's kick things off with the mechanics. Dexter goes back to basics: blood, tools, bodies. The blood slides he once treated as sacred trophies become props. He moves them from his air conditioner to Doakes' car, Doakes' gym bag, the places he knows forensics will swab and catalog, from a slide clinking into a duffel to dismembered parts stored near Doakes' cabin. We watch a vivid _failure montage of Dexter reverse engineering guilt, piece by piece. To keep this clear, he isn't planting random evidence. He's matching it to Doakes' movements and access points. We see Dexter break into Doakes' trunk because he remembers the exact parking spot. He stashes tools that mirror the butcher's kill kit in places Doakes can plausibly reach. He times everything, so when the task force retraces Doakes' last known steps, each turn yields a coincidental discovery. It looks organic. It looks inevitable. The central question for the task force has always been, who fits the profile? Dexter understands that profile better than anyone, and he starts bending it. Doakes' Army Special Forces history, his covert ops in Haiti, his comfort with guns and explosives, all the things that once made him a credible hunter now make him a credible monster. When C4 shows up at the cabin, when the narrative shifts to a Black Ops soldier gone rogue, Dexter is weaponizing Doakes' own biography. The same training that let Doakes track predators is repackaged as the psychology of a predator. Along the way, we see how precisely Dexter anticipates institutional thinking. He knows what LaGuerta will cling to and what the FBI will dismiss. He knows that matching blood from multiple Bay Harbor victims to a single cache will read as a smoking gun. The focus is not just on planting evidence, but on staging and investigation. He builds a breadcrumb trail that flatters their sense of forensic certainty. They don't feel manipulated, they feel brilliant, and this is where the ethical collapse becomes impossible to ignore. Dexter isn't simply protecting his secret under the code anymore. He is actively erasing the one cop who saw him clearly. Every planted slide rewrites Doakes' moral stand as sadism. Every staged connection turns "you're a killer" into "I was the killer all along." What does it mean when the only man who refused the illusion of control is posthumously cast as the ultimate failure? The coldness of the operation is underlined by those cabin visits. Dexter brings food to a starving, handcuffed Doakes, listens to him insist on the truth, then walks out to curate a world where that truth will never matter. He's not just betting that evidence wins. He's betting that a dead man's story is whatever the lab report says it is. By the time the frame is nearly complete and the net tightens around Doakes in absentia, the show has delivered its harshest critique yet. The same science that made Dexter untouchable can make an innocent man look undeniable. So what happens when that system decides it's done asking questions? So what happens when the system decides it's done asking questions? In that silence, we get the one voice that refuses to go along. While everyone else exhales and files Doakes under monster, LaGuerta is the person who looks at the same story, the same evidence, and says, "No, that's not him." To keep this clear, we have to go back to their history. Before he was the department's convenient Bay Harbor butcher, Doakes was LaGuerta's partner. She brought him into Miami Metro, backed him when his temper scared witnesses, translated his bluntness into something the brass could tolerate. There's mentorship there, but also a strange reversal. The politically savvy captain protecting the volatile soldier because she sees the discipline under the rage. She knows his psychology, his lines in the sand, the way he hunts bad men and refuses shortcuts. That shared past is the anchor that keeps her from being swept away by Dexter's plan. So when the slides appear, when the cabin is linked, when the timeline snaps into a neat, prosecutable arc, LaGuerta does what almost no one in this show ever does. She doesn't celebrate closure. She hesitates. We watch her face when she hears the official narrative: Doakes, secret sadist, double life as a serial killer. It doesn't track. Not with the man who tailed Dexter on instinct, who broke rules but not in that direction. The central question for her is simple. If Doakes was the butcher, why does his behavior never match the profile? In this video, we're going to keep circling that gap between narrative and behavior, and LaGuerta becomes our guide. Quietly, almost against the grain of the season's momentum, she launches her own investigation. She rereads old reports, re-examines Bay Harbor dump sites, retraces Doakes' movements during key murders. She's looking for the moment the mask should have slipped, the crack in his control that would confirm the file. Instead, she keeps finding a cop obsessed with Dexter. Not a man hiding his own ritual. The pressure around her is suffocating. Colleagues who, like Doakes, are still relieved to have a culprit. The feds want their serial killer case closed. The higher-ups hint that reopening anything would embarrass the department, jeopardize careers, threaten budgets. LaGuerta, often framed as the one chasing promotions and playing politics, is suddenly the only character willing to risk her trajectory for the truth. The irony is brutal, the principled killer is lying, and the political captain is the one acting out of principle. And look at the parallel the show is drawing. Doakes refused to accept Dexter's harmless lab geek performance, because the behavior never fit. LaGuerta now refuses to accept Doakes as butcher for the same reason. 2 different investigations, same stubborn refusal to accept the comforting story. That's exactly what makes both of them so dangerous to Dexter's sense of control. By the time this section of the story settles, LaGuerta is isolated. Even the people who mourn Doakes are willing to let the evidence define him. It's easier. Cleaner. That's the quiet horror. Once the frame is built, truth becomes a fringe theory. Yet she keeps going. Unresolved, but locked in. The one institutional ally Doakes has left. The question is, can she survive long enough to prove that the collapse of this case has Dexter's fingerprints all over it? And this is where the investigation quietly leaves the precinct and walks into the swamp. While LaGuerta is chasing patterns and paperwork, someone else is chasing Dexter himself. Not with evidence, with obsession. Leela enters this part of the story already off balance. She's lost Dexter, lost the fantasy of being his exclusive confidante, and we've watched her cross boundary after boundary just to stay inside his orbit. She burns down her own loft. She manipulates Rita's kids. She keeps framing her recklessness as emotional honesty. Psychologically, that's crucial. She doesn't see too far. She only sees not close enough to Dexter's darkness. To keep this clear, Leela does not become relevant here because she's clever in the way Doakes is clever. She becomes relevant because she is fixated. She remembers fragments of Dexter's schedule. Throwaway comments about the Everglades, the way he disappears when the Bay Harbor butcher case heats up. She follows impulses, not leads. It's less a rational plan than a compulsion. If Dexter is pulling away, she will follow the trail of his absence until it gives her something solid to hold. So, she drives out to that cabin. The world narrows to sawgrass, stagnant water, and that lonely structure sitting where no normal life happens. The stillness is wrong. No traffic, no neighbors, no reason for a blood spatter analyst to have a key. When Leela steps inside, she isn't just trespassing on private property. She's trespassing into the architecture of Dexter's control. And there, chained and brutalized, is James Doakes. The man Miami has already half convinced itself is a killer. He doesn't see a quirky artist. He sees a variable. Instantly, his survival instinct snaps to attention. He tries to seize control of the moment the only way he can. He tells her the truth. Dexter is the Bay Harbor butcher. Dexter put him here. Dexter is going to kill him. There's no time, no appeal left. Just the urgency of someone who knows the clock has already run out. The central question is, what happens when that truth lands in a mind like Lila's? With Deb, that revelation would be shattering. With LaGuerta, it would be vindication. With Lila, it's confirmation. The cabin, the plastic, the imprisoned cop, all of it fuses perfectly with the mythic image she's built of Dexter as a pure creature of darkness. Instead of recoiling, she's thrilled. The gap between who she wanted him to be and who he really is collapses. Now we have a triangle of perception with no shared reality. Doakes sees a monster who must be stopped. Leela sees a dark soulmate who must be protected. Dexter sees both of them as threats to the fragile equilibrium he's been pretending is a life. His code has no clause for this. In this video, we're going to keep tracking these moments where an unaccounted-for variable detonates Dexter's careful structure. Leela at the cabin is one of the purest. He never planned for a third party to find this place, much less someone willing to side with his worst impulses. Yet here she is, standing in that dim light, holding knowledge that could free Doakes and expose Dexter. Or bind her to him forever in the most catastrophic way possible. The consequences of that choice are about to rewrite the entire Bay Harbor butcher case. She doesn't scream. She doesn't panic. She just decides. In that moment, Leela takes in the tied-up sergeant, the blood slides, the plastic, and she runs a twisted calculation we've seen Dexter run 100 times. Only her conclusion is different. If Doakes is a threat to Dexter's freedom, then killing Doakes isn't murder. It's a love language. This is where the psychology of the season flips. Leela has watched Dexter hesitate, watched him try to follow a code that keeps his hands technically clean when it comes to Doakes. So she reframes his reluctance as a weakness she can fix. If Dexter can't cross this line, she will cross it for him. To keep this clear, in her head, this isn't about evidence or an investigation. It's about proving she is the one person willing to do what even the monster won't. Outside, the swamp is quiet. Inside, she moves with eerie control. Leela drags fuel cans into the cabin, splashing gasoline across wooden beams, plastic sheeting. The floor at Doakes' feet. He explodes into motion. Not physically, he's still chained, but verbally. He tries every tactic he has left. Soldier to civilian, cop to civilian, human to human. He calls her crazy, then tries reason, then finally begs her to think about the consequences. The mismatch is surreal. Doakes is sweating, straining against restraints, the embodiment of panic. Leela is calm, almost gentle, explaining that Dexter needs to be protected from this part of himself, that Doakes is in the way of their connection. The central question for her is simple. What is one man's life compared to the fantasy of a future with Dexter? By the time she pulls out the lighter, the answer is already decided. In his final moments, Doakes is everything his trajectory promised. A soldier who survived black ops in Haiti, a cop who hunted killers face to face, the only person in Miami who saw through Dexter from day one. And now, he's trapped, disarmed, powerless, precisely because he refused to become what he was chasing. He could have killed Dexter in that cabin. He didn't. That restraint becomes his cage. Flame hits vapor. The explosion is instant and brutal. Wood, glass, and plastic erupt outward. The cabin doesn't just burn, it disintegrates. In that blast, the show wipes out more than a building. It annihilates the blood slides, the kill room, the one physical space where Dexter's truth and Doakes' knowledge coexisted in the open. The focus is not just on the spectacle, but on what vanishes, proof, witness, and any clean line between framing and killing. And Dexter? He's not there. He doesn't light the match. Yet every step that put Doakes in that cabin, every lie to Miami Metro, every calculated move in the Bay Harbor Butcher case funnels into this moment. Leela's act is an extension of Dexter's plan, just executed by someone with no code at all. His attempt to avoid killing an innocent directly still creates an innocent casualty, outsourced to a person even less restrained than he is. Burning debris rains into the swamp. The shockwave ripples across the black water. Doakes' body, shattered and charred, becomes literal fuel for the myth that will define the entire investigation. When the fire dies, all that remains is ash and a narrative waiting to be written, the monstrous cabin, the incriminating remains, and a convenient dead suspect. Along the way, the one man who fully knew Dexter is erased, and Miami is now perfectly positioned to canonize James Doakes as the Bay Harbor Butcher he died trying to stop. From here, the collapse of the case is inevitable. From here, the collapse of the case is inevitable. The fire goes out, the smoke clears, and what's left is not an open question, but an open invitation for the institution to decide what happened. And institutions hate a vacuum. So let's kick things off with the discovery. We watch law enforcement pick through the wreckage of the cabin, blackened beams, twisted metal, and the wet chemical smell of burned accelerant clinging to everything. In the ash, they find human remains. Teeth, bone, enough for a match. The name that comes back is James Doakes. A missing sergeant, a secret cabin, and a site that just happens to intersect with the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation. How long does it take before someone says the words out loud? To keep this clear, Dexter's plan works not because it's flawless, but because the context is desperate for a solution. The planted slides, the garbage bags, the geography of that remote spot in the Everglades, and Doakes' unexplained disappearance all line up into a pattern that feels inevitable. The butcher is tied to marinas and remote dump sites. Doakes has been acting erratic, vanishing on his own surveillance runs. Now, his body appears at ground zero of a kill room. From the outside, without Dexter in the equation, what else could this be? In this video, we're going to keep coming back to that gap between what actually happened and what everyone needs to believe. At the press conference, we see that need crystallize. The brass step up to the podium, framed by seals and flags, and announce that the Bay Harbor Butcher case is closed. Reporters lean forward, microphones out, hungry for a clean ending. They get a perfect one, a decorated cop revealed as a secret monster, dead in a blaze of poetic justice. The public gets something even more valuable than answers. They get relief, a face for the horror, a name they can curse and then file away. Inside Miami Metro, the psychology shifts fast. Some colleagues are stunned, protesting that Doakes was intense but loyal. Others immediately pivot to, "I always knew something was off," retrofitting every angry outburst, every boundary violation, into evidence of a double life. We watch memory itself become a malleable tool, bending around the new official story. Was he just a hard-ass, or was he always hunting cover for his own crimes? The central question lands on La Guerta. She hears the same facts, sees the same evidence, but cannot reconcile this narrative with the man she mentored. Her discomfort is visible, a crack in the consensus reality. When everyone else moves to acceptance, she stalls at suspicion. That hesitation is crucial, because it shows how once the institution decides who the monster was, the investigation stops being a search for truth and becomes a justification for the verdict. Meanwhile, Dexter watches it all and feels the paradox hit. His greatest threat has become his greatest shield. Relief, because the heat is gone. Guilt, because a man who tried to stop him is being buried as a serial killer. And beneath both, a chilling realization: if the system can be this wrong, what's to stop him from using that failure again? By the end, the city exhales. The Bay Harbor Butcher is officially solved. News cycles move on. Doakes is frozen in history as the villain of a story he died trying to rewrite. And that institutional lie becomes the foundation for Dexter's next trajectory, and for La Guerta's refusal to let the case stay buried. And here's where the so-called victory curdles. The Bay Harbor Butcher case is closed, Miami celebrates, and Dexter walks away clean. But the one emotion we do not see is triumph. What we get instead is that quiet, disorienting hollow in his voiceover, the sense that this win came at a cost his code was never built to process. Doakes is dead. Dexter is alive. On paper, the plan worked, but the central question gnawing at him is simple and brutal. If he didn't technically kill Doakes, why does it feel like murder? In this video, we're going to sit in that gap between what Dexter can admit and what he actually feels, because this is where his illusion of control starts to fracture from the inside. To keep this clear, we watch him reach for mental escape hatches. Leela blew up the cabin, not him. Doakes was dangerous, volatile, already a killer from his Black Ops past. The frame job protected Rita, the kids, Deb, even Miami Metro from the scandal of the real truth. Each justification is neat, logical, almost clinical. And yet every time he repeats them, there's that edge in the narration, like he's testing whether the words will finally make the guilt go away. They don't. Because Doakes doesn't stay in the explosion, he stays in Dexter's head. Flashes of their confrontations at crime scenes, the jungle-trained stare that never bought the harmless lab tech act, the cabin conversations where Doakes, chained and furious, still calls him exactly what he is, a killer hiding behind a code. How many people in Dexter's life ever saw him that clearly and refused to look away? The irony is vicious. Dexter has slaughtered mobsters, serial killers, rapists, predators. By his rules, they all deserved it. Yet the death that haunts him most is the one man who never made it to the table because the code said he was off limits. Doakes was innocent of the Butcher murders. That means the system Harry designed, the system Dexter worships, just generated its first undeniable innocent casualty. That's not a safeguard. That's a design failure. From here, his psychology shifts. The focus is not just on whether he can keep killing bad guys, but on the collateral damage orbiting his darkness. Harry kills himself after seeing Dexter's reality. Lila becomes a weapon he pretends he didn't aim. Doakes dies wearing Dexter's crimes. Along the way, Dexter starts to realize the pattern. His plans don't only target monsters, they warp everyone around him into victims, accomplices, or both. So he pulls back, not from killing, but from intimacy. Later seasons show a new wariness in how close he lets people get, not just because they might expose him, but because they might die trying. Miguel, Lumen, Deb, Hannah, Harrison, every relationship after Doakes sits under that shadow. What happens to you if you get too close to the Bay Harbor Butcher and don't look away? And there's no confession, no release valve. Dexter never tells Deb, never tells anyone who could understand what it meant to have the one honest cop in Miami Metro die for his secret. The guilt becomes another hidden layer under the slides, under the trophies, under the code itself. The case file is closed, but the moral debt isn't. It keeps collecting interest in nightmares, flashbacks to that cabin, and the quiet knowledge that when the code faced its biggest test, it failed, and that failure is going to echo the next time someone starts seeing him the way Doakes did. That moral debt doesn't just sit in Dexter's subconscious. It leaks forward. It hangs over every later investigation, every close call. As a name on a closed file that never really closes, Sergeant James Doakes. From season 3 onward, the Bay Harbor Butcher case is supposed to be over. Doakes is the monster, the evidence is clear, and Miami Metro moves on to new bodies, new killers, new task forces. But every time the Butcher resurfaces in conversation, Doakes' name does double duty. It's a shield Dexter hides behind, and a specter that reminds us how close the world already came to seeing him. Quinn poking around Dexter's finances, the FBI referencing the case, even casual jokes in the squad room, all of it relies on the fiction that Doakes was the threat. And we know that fiction is built on a corpse in a cabin. To keep this clear, the focus is not just on callbacks, it's on how those echoes warp Dexter's psychology. After Doakes, his paranoia spikes. He's more aggressive about controlling narratives, more jumpy about anyone who watches him too closely. Miguel Prado wanting in on the code? That's thrilling to Dexter, but it's also terrifying, because Miguel has that same locked-on intensity Doakes had. Isaac Serco tracking him with surgical precision, Trinity circling his family life, even Hannah reading his emotional patterns. Each new antagonist gets unconsciously measured against the one man who saw through him instantly. The central question under all that tension is simple. What if another Doakes shows up? Not another serial killer, not another proche gone wrong, but another cop with instincts so sharp they cut through the disguise in a week. Dexter's plans in the later seasons, manipulating evidence, framing others, vanishing suspects, are all, on some level, preemptive strikes against the possibility of that happening again. Doakes proved the code can't account for a human variable like that. And then there's LaGuerta. Her arc is the clearest sign that Doakes' ghost is still working the case. She knew him. She mentored him. She remembers a volatile man, yes, but also a relentless investigator who hated dirty cops and shortcuts. When she finds those fresh blood slides in Season 7, the official story collapses in her hands. She reopens the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation explicitly because she can't square Doakes' memory with the file that branded him a serial killer. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to that. The system had a chance to believe its best skeptic, and it didn't. Along the way, we see Dexter's imagined judgment flare up. Moments where he's cornered, and even if the show doesn't play the audio, we can almost hear Doakes calling him a coward, mocking the rationalizations, reminding him that all this control depends on other people staying blind. That's the larger trajectory Doakes represents. He is the path not taken, the version of law enforcement that might have actually stopped Dexter if the world had listened. The one true skeptic is gone. The structural hole at Miami Metro never really heals, and that leaves us with a lingering, ominous question hanging over every future season. How long can a lie this big survive without another Doakes emerging to tear it open? That question. How long can the lie survive without another Doakes? Folds directly into the ugliest truth of the Bay Harbor Butcher arc. The lie only survives because the story feeds Doakes to it. The one cop who was right from day one becomes the official monster, so the real monster can go home to his son. To keep this clear, let's kick things off with the narrative mechanics. From a purely structural standpoint, blaming Doakes is efficient. It closes the investigation, protects Dexter's cover, and lets the show reset for the next season of normal life under the code. But that efficiency has a moral price tag. The writers hand Dexter the cleanest possible escape hatch by pinning everything on the only character whose instincts never failed. The plan that finally works for Dexter is not one he designs. It's the universe accepting his scapegoat. Once we sit with that, our sympathy gets complicated fast. We're being asked to live in a world where an innocent black cop with combat trauma and a temper becomes the face of industrial-scale murder, where every news clip, every case file, every grieving family is looking at James Doakes' photo and attaching their horror to him. Can we keep rooting for Dexter as the clever vigilante when we know exactly whose reputation, whose memory he's standing on? The racial and institutional subtext here is not subtle. Miami Metro, the FBI, the media, they all accept a volatile, battle-scarred black man as the butcher, with almost alarming relief. Doakes' anger, his special forces history, his disciplinary record, all become retroactive evidence that he was always capable of this level of violence. The system doesn't just fail him, it uses him. It takes every stereotype about black rage and weaponizes it to close an ugly file. And Dexter's world both critiques and participates in that dynamic. The focus is not just on LaGuerta fighting the conclusion, but on how easily everyone else moves on once the frame fits the institutional narrative. LaGuerta's doubt is there to reassure us that the show sees the injustice. Yet the official record never changes. The frame stands. The lie hardens into history. That's where Dexter's anti-hero status really starts to fracture. In this video, we're going to keep tracking his trajectory from necessary evil to something far less defensible, and Doakes is a turning point. The more we replay that cabin, that explosion, that funeral, the harder it is to see Dexter as a cool technician managing his urges. This is a man who lets a colleague, a black colleague, carry his crimes into the grave because the alternative is losing control. The discomfort is not a bug, it's the point. Doakes' fate is designed to sting, to turn the Bay Harbor Butcher resolution into a poisoned compromise rather than a victory lap. Along the way, the fandom's refusal to let it go, the constant Doakes deserved better debates, becomes its own meta-investigation, a way of continuing his resistance against a story that tried to bury him. In the end, Doakes' scapegoating is Dexter's darkest mirror. It's the moment our desire to see him escape collides with the realization of what that escape actually costs, and it leaves a crack in the fantasy that the series will spend the rest of its run trying and failing to plaster over. If Dexter's scapegoating Doakes is the crack in the fantasy, then Doakes himself is the hammer. He's what happens when you take a man built for sanctioned violence, drop him into a world of paperwork and politics, and never give him a myth to hide behind. Before Miami Metro, Doakes is Special Forces. Haiti, Black Ops missions where the plan is simple: identify the target, neutralize the threat, survive the fallout. He's trained to kill on command, to live in that adrenal edge where control means reacting faster and hitting harder than the other guy. Then the deployment ends, the war zone evaporates, and that same intensity walks into a fluorescent lit squad room that has no idea what to do with it. To keep this clear, Doakes' darkness is not Dexter's darkness. Dexter has ritual, plastic, trophies, a whole code built to turn compulsion into a philosophy. Doakes has rage, trauma, and a hair-trigger sense of justice. He doesn't stalk people to savor the fear. He doesn't wrap his brutality in language about needs or the passenger. When he beats a suspect, when he crosses a line, he knows exactly what he's doing, and he hates that part of himself, even as he uses it. Both men are weapons shaped by institutions. Harry and Miami Metro design Dexter's trajectory, teach him how to disappear inside the role of harmless lab rat while the investigation literally runs through his hands. The military and law enforcement forge Doakes. They reward his aggression, then punish him for not being able to turn it off. The difference is narrative. Dexter is handed a story that his violence is purposeful, necessary, controlled. Doakes never gets that comfort, and he refuses to invent it for himself. He doesn't stand over bodies, telling himself he's a necessary monster, cleaning up the world. He drinks, he snaps, he isolates. He knows he's messed up. He knows he's a liability. That self-awareness is exactly why he can see through Dexter's code. When he calls Dexter a freak from episode 1, it isn't jealousy. It's recognition without the marketing department. So when Dexter says, in effect, I only kill bad guys, I have rules, I'm different, Doakes is the only character who hears the spin. He recognizes the same capacity for violence, stripped of uniforms and chains of command, and he doesn't buy the branding. Is there any ethical way to channel a compulsion to kill, or is Dexter just a more articulate version of the chaos he claims to control? That's the central question sitting between them in that cabin. In another version of this story, Doakes is the protagonist, a damaged cop with a black ops past trying to expose a charming serial killer everyone else adores. The focus is not just on what he does, but on how the world responds by calling him unstable, then using his death to close the case. Along the way, the show keeps that alternate series alive in the background, a constant reminder that Dexter's perspective is not the only possible frame. That's why Doakes feels like Dexter's truest equal and opposite. He's the only man who saw Dexter clearly, fought him honestly, and paid the ultimate price for being right too early in a world that preferred a simpler monster. And the real sting is this: Dexter wins that confrontation. But the plan to bury Doakes' truth never really holds, and the next person who sees Dexter for what he is won't be so easy to sacrifice. And that's where Doakes' real legacy kicks in. Because once we strip away the explosion, the frame job, and the official case file, we're left with a brutal ledger, every single thing James Doakes proved about Dexter, just by refusing to play along. From the pilot, he's the only cop who walks into a room with Dexter and doesn't see a quirky lab tech or a damaged orphan. He sees a blank, no warmth, no social microsignals, no fear. That's not evidence in an investigation file, but it is evidence in the way a soldier reads a battlefield. Doakes doesn't clock Dexter as guilty of a specific crime. He clocks him as wrong, as a human pattern that doesn't add up. To keep this clear, we have to look at who Doakes was before Miami Metro. Army Special Forces. Black Ops in Haiti. A man trained to live in compartments, to shut off emotion, to weaponize discipline and violence on command. When he looks at Dexter, he's not just annoyed by a coworker. He's recognizing familiar architecture, compartmentalization, emotional dissociation, predatory calm disguised as composure. The difference is, Doakes came back from that world with rage and scars. Dexter comes in with a smile and a code. That's why Doakes becomes the one variable Dexter can never fully plan for. Every major crack in Dexter's cover in seasons 1 and 2 has Doakes' fingerprints on it. The late-night tailing that forces Dexter to improvise his stalking routes. The confrontations at crime scenes where Doakes publicly calls him a freak, making everyone else notice the tension. The moment Doakes grabs Dexter's blood slides and finally sees the trophies. Each incident is a small operational failure for Dexter, but together they mark a psychological collapse of his nobody suspects me fantasy. In this video, we're going to keep returning to that gap between Dexter's self-image and the way other people actually experience him. Doakes is the first person who refuses to be charmed, bought off, or gaslit into doubting his instincts. He won't accept Dexter's jokes, his trauma story, or his carefully curated harmlessness. How many times does Dexter try to de-escalate with words, only to get hit with the same answer, "I see you"? That's the one line Dexter's entire life is not built to withstand. So, Doakes becomes the living audit of Dexter's perfect monster fantasy. The focus is not just on the chase, but on what Doakes' existence proves. Dexter is visible, readable, and profoundly limited. One man, working mostly on instinct, nearly blows up the entire Bay Harbor Butcher cover story before the task force even gets organized. What does that say about Dexter's supposed control? And here's the paradox that haunts the rest of the series. The man framed as the monster is the only one who ever truly saw the real monster. Doakes dies, the file closes, Dexter walks free. But the trajectory Doakes set in motion doesn't stop. The next person who sees Dexter won't be a colleague on the margins. They'll be inside his home, inside his heart. And the consequences of that exposure will make Bay Harbor look almost contained. And here's where the knife really twists. Doakes is not just the man who's right. He's the only one who refuses to be comforted by Dexter. From day one, Lagerta flirts with Dexter's mystique, Batista leans on him as the quiet brain in the room, Masuka treats him as a fellow weirdo in on the joke. Deb builds her entire emotional scaffolding on the idea that Dexter is damaged but safe, a broken little boy wrapped in a man's body. They see quirks, trauma, even charm. Doakes sees something else. He looks at the same smile, the same stillness, and reads a predator. To keep this clear, we need to sit in that contrast. Miami Metro experiences Dexter as a solution. He makes their cases. He translates blood into stories that close files, win promotions, and keep the department's clearance rate respectable. Every time Dexter walks a detective through a reconstruction, he's not just advancing an investigation, he's buying social capital, weaving himself into their professional survival. Who wants to question the guy who keeps making you look competent? That's the institutional blind spot. Workplace bias plus emotional dependence equals a protective bubble. LaGuerta needs her unit to function. Batista needs the overtime and the wins. Deb needs someone who never leaves. So when Doakes growls that there's something off about Dexter, they don't hear a warning. They hear a threat to the person who props up their lives. How often do we see that in real systems, a charismatic performer shielded because their results feel indispensable? In this video, we're going to keep returning to that pattern. The more Dexter feeds the machine, the less the machine can imagine him as a malfunction. The central question isn't just how Dexter hides, but why everyone helps him hide from themselves. Along the way, Doakes pays the price for being early. He pushes too hard in Season 1, snapping at Dexter at crime scenes, tailing him, breaking the unspoken plan of office harmony. The response is immediate. He's labeled jealous, unstable, obsessed. Colleagues laugh off his suspicions. LaGuerta sidelines him. Deb bristles, defending Dexter with a ferocity she rarely musters for herself. The social punishment is its own containment strategy. If Doakes is the crazy one, then nobody has to re-evaluate Dexter. Watch the failure montage in your head. Doakes corners Dexter in the hallway and gets brushed off. He calls him a freak in front of the squad, and Masuka snickers. He follows Dexter to a crime scene and is reprimanded for harassment rather than praised for vigilance. Each beat reinforces the same message. The institution would rather pathologize the whistleblower than interrogate the golden boy. And that's the tragedy. The department that will later canonize Dexter as the Bay Harbor Butcher hero already had a living, breathing contradiction standing in the bullpen. They had the truth in-house, in uniform, with a badge and a gut that never wavered. But they chose the comforting narrative, the helpful blood guy, the loyal brother, over the uncomfortable witness. That choice doesn't just seal Doakes' fate, it sets the trajectory for what happens when the next person to see Dexter can't be written off so easily, because this time he loves her back. So when we say the next person who sees Dexter can't be written off so easily, we're really talking about the template Doakes already gave us. Here's what happens when the system takes a man with darkness, points him at bad guys, and never gives him a code to slow down the trigger pull. Let's kick things off with the surface contrast. Doakes is loud, volatile, always 1 second from throwing a punch. Dexter is quiet, meticulous, gliding through the bullpen with coffee and quips. But line up their histories, and the gap closes fast. Doakes has black ops missions in Haiti. Dexter has black plastic kill rooms. Doakes has sanctioned executions in the fog of war. Dexter has ritual executions in the fluorescent glow of a forensics lab. Both are instruments of violence, only one is pretending he isn't. In this video, we're going to treat Doakes as Dexter, without Harry's training wheels. The military and then Miami Metro take Doakes' capacity for aggression and refine it into a tactical asset. Harry and the justice system do the same thing to Dexter, just in private. One gets night raids and interrogation rooms, the other gets a garage with knives and slides. Different institutions, same psychology, identify the weapon, point it, and trust you can keep control. To keep this clear, watch how each man processes what he does. When Doakes beats a suspect or pulls his gun too fast, we see the fallout hit him in real time. He's reprimanded. He's benched. He's seething, but he's also aware there are consequences and that he's part of a chain of command. Dexter, by contrast, narrates his darkness like he's filing a lab report. He dissociates, turns murder into an internal monologue about need and design, and pushes guilt into an abstract, dark passenger. Who sounds more dangerous in the long run? The central question with Doakes isn't, is he violent? We know he is. It's, what does he do with that violence? And this is where the moral funhouse mirror snaps into focus. Doakes refuses to hide his rage. He refuses to pretend he likes Dexter. He refuses to look away when the evidence and his instincts say, this guy is wrong. On the surface, that makes him look monstrous, the angriest man in the room. But ethically, that anger is at least honest. He is what he appears to be. Dexter is the inverse. Calm voice, clean shirt, careful plan. Underneath, a body count that dwarfs anything Doakes ever did in uniform. The focus is not just on who spills more blood, it's on who lies more completely about what that blood means. Doakes is the cop who hunts a killer and dies for it. Dexter is the killer who hides behind the cop and lives because of it. That paradox is going to matter when we get to Deb. Because she inherits Dexter's capacity for denial without even realizing she's looking into the same mirror. Doakes isn't just Dexter's opposite. He's the stress test that keeps slamming into Dexter's mask until the hairline cracks become structural damage. Every time Doakes steps into frame, Dexter's perfect system stops looking like control and starts looking like a desperate juggling act. Let's kick things off with the early surveillance, because that's where we see how fragile Dexter's routine really is. Doakes tailing him after late nights, materializing at crime scenes with that dead-eyed stare, calling him out for being off when everyone else laughs it off as social awkwardness. Dexter has a plan for everything. Stalk, confirm, prepare, dispose. Doakes introduces a fifth step Dexter never accounted for: evade. Suddenly he's ditching blood slides in the ocean faster than he wants to, cutting short his post-kill rituals, improvising alibis about meetings and late-night lab work because there's a black sedan in the rearview mirror. That's not mastery. That's scrambling. From a forensic standpoint, the collapse is even sharper. In this video, we're going to keep returning to the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation, because that's where Doakes weaponizes Dexter's own strengths against him. The bloodslide trophies that once symbolized order become the very pattern that Miami Metro can map. Doakes doesn't have proof yet, but his questions force Dexter into riskier moves, sneaking into the precinct to steal slides. Over-explaining trace evidence, nudging colleagues away from viable leads. To keep this clear, Dexter's biggest operational failures here are self-inflicted. Doakes presses, Dexter panics, and suddenly, the meticulous analyst is contaminating scenes and altering reports in ways Harry's code never anticipated. That's the next fracture. Doakes doesn't just threaten Dexter's cover. He corrupts Dexter's morality narrative. Harry's rules are supposed to be simple. Only kill killers. Don't get caught. Don't frame the innocent. But with Doakes closing in, Dexter starts bending every one of those principles. He plants tranquilizers in Doakes' car. He manipulates surveillance logs. He seriously considers killing an innocent cop just to protect his secret. The focus is not just on whether Dexter succeeds, it's on how quickly the code becomes negotiable the moment it's inconvenient. What does it say about his psychology that the first real investigation aimed at him turns Harry's ethics into optional guidelines? And every time Dexter thinks he's regained equilibrium, Doakes escalates. Dexter dodges a tail, so Doakes bugs his car. Dexter explains away one coincidence, so Doakes digs into his past, his foster history, his uncanny proximity to major cases. The pattern is relentless, temporary calm, then a sharper spike of pressure. Is Dexter actually composed, or is his calm just the absence of someone like Doakes breathing down his neck? Along the way, the show trains us to feel that pressure as thrilling suspense, but structurally, it's doing something colder. It's proving that Dexter's control only exists in environments where no one truly questions him. Once a single cop refuses the fantasy, the whole trajectory of Dexter's life shudders. In the next section, when Doakes finally catches Dexter in the act, we'll see what happens when that stress test doesn't just crack the mask, but rips it off entirely. So when Doakes finally catches Dexter in that cabin, we're not just watching a mask come off. We're watching the last honest version of the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation exist in real time, and then get literally blown off the map. Let's kick things off with that image. Doakes locked in a cage, surrounded by plastic, blood slides, and dismemberment tools. The one man who never believed the performance is now forced to live inside Dexter's reality. He begs Dexter to turn himself in. He refuses every offer to compromise, and he keeps repeating the central question the show has been dodging. What gives you the right? Doakes doesn't want to join the code. He wants it exposed. And then Leela walks in and solves Dexter's problem, the only way Dexter never planned for. Gasoline, a match. An explosion that erases the only witness who knew everything and stayed incorruptible. From the outside, it looks clean. Cabin destroyed, body burned, killer dead with his victims. Inside the story, it's the moment truth is vaporized, so the lie can finally harden. To keep this clear, look at how the evidence falls into place after Doakes' death. The slides are there. The tools are there. The dismembered body in the cabin ties directly to the Bay Harbor Butcher's pattern. Dexter has already nudged the investigation toward Doakes, with the marina lead and the suspicious tailing. Now the blast fuses all of that circumstantial suspicion to a corpse. The case is solved at the exact second it becomes unsolvable. Miami Metro doesn't just accept this. They need it. It rescues their pride by proving the killer was external to their family. A rogue sergeant hiding in plain sight rather than a beloved bloodspatter guy they eat donuts with. It rescues their faith in procedure because all the boxes get checked, suspect identified, physical evidence secured, narrative coherence achieved. And it rescues their affection for Dexter because the alternative would be unthinkable. Are they really going to reopen every scene he ever processed? The focus is not just on institutional laziness here, it's on institutional psychology. LaGuerta gets to mourn a fallen colleague while closing her most terrifying case. Deb gets to keep her brother. Batista gets to believe the system worked, even if it was late. The entire department chooses a dead scapegoat over a living contradiction. Who wants to admit that the quiet analyst who made them feel competent was actually the operational failure at the heart of their success story? That's the horror. Doakes dies for being right. The system he bled for rewrites him as the monster, so it never has to question its own trajectory. In this video, we're going to keep tracking that pattern, because this is not a one-off twist. Along the way, every time Dexter's control slips, another ally, another scapegoat, another piece of his world will be drafted into the lie he started here, in the ashes of that cabin. Because here's the twist. In the moment that looks like Dexter's greatest escape, something in his story quietly dies with Doakes. The cabin explodes, the investigation resets, Miami breathes a sigh of relief. But Dexter's victory is actually the point where the illusion of control rots from the inside. Watch Dexter's face when he realizes Leela has killed Doakes for him. There's that initial spike of relief, the animal part of his psychology registering that the immediate threat is gone. No more tailing, no more surveillance, No more Doakes materializing at crime scenes with that wordless accusation in his eyes. The plan to frame Doakes worked. He lives. Then the second wave hits. Guilt, disgust, the quiet knowledge that he didn't just let an innocent man die. He allowed that man to be branded the monster he actually is. This is not the code Harry taught him, or at least, it's not the code as Dexter pretends to understand it. Harry's rules are simple, almost ritualistic: only kill killers, prove they deserve it, keep the mask intact, stalk the target, confirm the victims, prepare the kill room. But when Dexter locks Doakes in that cage, he already knows he's holding someone who doesn't meet the criteria. The moment he chooses to keep Doakes alive as a backup scapegoat, he crosses a line the code was supposed to prevent. By the time Leela lights the match, the moral failure has already happened. To keep this clear, the focus is not just on whether Dexter literally kills Doakes. The focus is on complicity. He could have freed him. He could have turned himself in. Instead, he watches the world file Doakes under Bay Harbor Butcher and quietly accepts the benefits. Harry's code is permanently stained, because now it's not a shield against innocent blood. It's a story Dexter uses to forgive himself for sacrificing whoever he has to in order to survive. And once that boundary breaks, notice how the trajectory of later seasons shifts. It becomes easier for Dexter to rationalize Miguel Prado's corruption, to manipulate Lumen into his pattern, to pull Deborah across the line until she's pointing a gun at Lagerta instead of him. Each major section will trace another step, but the template is set here. When cornered, Dexter will let someone else burn in his place, and then rebuild his self-image around the ashes. Is it any surprise that by New Blood, he's rewriting the same pattern with Harrison and Angelastown? Doakes' absence is its own kind of presence. Without that one cop who never bought the mask, Dexter loses the only internal check that wasn't imaginary. No one is there to say, "I see you," and mean it as a threat, not an invitation. Without Doakes, Dexter's self-mythologizing accelerates. He is the avenging angel, the necessary monster, the man whose plans only fail because other people are weak. And with no one left who instinctively calls him what he is, how far will he let that fantasy run before everything collapses for real? In the next section, we'll see exactly how quickly the consequences compound once that pressure is gone. Once that pressure is gone, we circle back to the central question that's been humming under Dexter from the pilot. Can a monster really live unnoticed inside a functioning society? Or is exposure inevitable the moment someone refuses to play along? Doakes is the show's first and clearest attempt to answer that. And the answer lands a lot earlier in the trajectory than most of us remember. From the first crime scene side eyes to the parking lot confrontations, Doakes is the personification of exposure. He's not fooled by the harmless lab nerd mask. He's not seduced by Dexter's fake awkward charm. And he doesn't need a bloodslide or a body dump to start the investigation. His psychology reads the dissonance immediately. Something is wrong with this guy. That's it. That's the crack. To keep this clear, Dexter's entire plan for survival is built on camouflage, blend into Miami Metro, play the coworker, play the brother, play the boyfriend. The code manages the killing. The mask manages the neighbors. But Doakes proves that true invisibility is a fantasy. All it takes is one person who won't be charmed, who won't be distracted, who keeps staring at the gap between the performance and the reality. One person who says, out loud, what everyone else only feels in flashes, you're off. And once that happens, control is already gone. We watch Dexter scramble in Season 2, not because the Bay Harbor Butcher task force is brilliant, but because Doakes simply will not stop. He tails Dexter. He breaks into the apartment. he finds the blood slides. He literally catches Dexter mid-kill at the cabin. The focus is not just on procedural investigation here. It's on how quickly Dexter's careful system collapses the second a single relentless observer refuses to accept the narrative. In this video, we're going to keep seeing this same pressure reappear in different costumes. Lundy arrives as the quiet, methodical version of Doakes. No temper, no outbursts, but the same unshakable sense that a pattern is wrong, that the code is leaving a trail. Miguel is the corrupted mirror. Instead of hunting Dexter, he wants in, turning exposure into collaboration that Dexter can't control. Hannah flips it again, recognizing the monster, because she is one, turning intimacy into its own form of surveillance. Different styles, different seasons, same basic problem, someone sees too much. Each major section will show that Dexter never truly evades detection. He survives it once. He survives Doakes by imprisoning him, by letting Leela turn the cabin into a furnace, by allowing the only man who fully saw him to be rewritten as the Bay Harbor Butcher. That's not stealth. That's a cover-up. And from that moment on, everything is borrowed time. Because the paradox at the heart of his greatest escape is brutal, the only proof his mask works is that he had to destroy the one person who tore it off. So when later seasons pretend the question is still open, is it really? Or are we just watching the consequences slowly catch up to an answer the show already gave us in season 2? And this is why Doakes doesn't just disappear when Lila lights that cabin. He lingers. In the gaps, in the moments when Dexter makes a choice, and we can't help asking, what would have happened if Doakes were still here to call this out? From the instant he side-eyes Dexter at a crime scene to the last time he spits, "You're the Bay Harbor Butcher," Doakes imprints a counter-narrative on the show. He is the one cop whose investigation isn't hypnotized by Dexter's performance of control. So, when Dexter later spirals through Miguel, through Lumen, through Hannah, every new plan carries a ghost question. Would this have survived Doakes' instinct, his refusal to play along, his total lack of patience for the code as an excuse? To keep this clear, think about the big failures. Dexter grooming Miguel as a partner. Dexter letting Lumen into the ritual. Dexter believing he can raise Harrison while still killing. Each time, the central question under the surface is not just will this work, but who is left to say no? Doakes was that no. The human firewall. Once he's gone, the show keeps staging scenarios where a Doakes-shaped hole makes everything easier for Dexter and much harder for us to justify. And the fandom feels that. Along the way, we've basically split into Team Dexter and Team Doakes, even if we don't always use those labels. On one side, people defend the fantasy. Dexter's code, Dexter's targets, Dexter as necessary monster. On the other, people point back to that cabin and say, the only person who saw through him from day one ended up framed and burned. That argument never dies, because Doakes destabilizes the show's default setting of identification. Are we really supposed to root for the guy who let an innocent man take his fall? Once you notice it, Doakes becomes a moral baseline the series can't escape. Every time Dexter crosses a new line, our memory drags us back to the moment he watched that cabin explode and let the world believe the investigation was over. Killing an innocent by omission. Corrupting the justice system he pretends to serve. Sacrificing a colleague to preserve the myth of control. Later betrayals of Deb, Harrison, even strangers. All feel like echoes, because we've already seen the worst-case version. He will let a good man burn to protect the code. In this video, we're going to keep returning to that pressure point, because Doakes is the conscience the show killed, but could never fully bury. His seasons feel like the moral high-water mark precisely because after he's gone, the narrative can slide into rationalization more easily, while our memory refuses to follow. So when Dexter keeps insisting he's careful, he's principled, he's necessary, Doakes' voice cuts through the lie. And as Dexter's trajectory heads toward Iron Lake and one final collapse, the question hanging over everything is simple. What happens when a story loses its last honest witness, but his judgment still haunts every frame? So let's close the file on James Doakes by tracing the whole trajectory we've been circling. From the first moment he walks on screen, he is the only cop who looks at Dexter and doesn't see a harmless lab rat. He sees a predator. He feels it before there's a pattern, before there's an investigation, before there's even a name like Bay Harbor Butcher to hang it on. Across season 1, that instinct hardens into a mission. Doakes crowds Dexter at crime scenes, tails him at night, blows up at him in the bullpen. Where everyone else buys the performance, Doakes rejects the plan on sight. No charm, no plausible deniability. Just a soldier who's been around real monsters and refuses to pretend this one smells normal. In a show obsessed with psychology, he's the one character who doesn't need a profile. His body already knows the truth. By season 2, the cat and mouse is fully weaponized. Doakes breaks into Dexter's apartment, finds the blood slides, and in one brutal instant, the whole careful architecture of control collapses. Stalk the target, confirm the victims, prepare the kill room, leave no evidence. Doakes is the first person who proves that system is not flawless design. It's a fragile routine that only works as long as no one like him is watching. Then we get the cabin, the capture, the reversal where the hunter ends up caged, beaten, and begging Dexter to face what he is. Doakes becomes the mirror without a code, the same capacity for violence, the same proximity to death. But pointed in the right direction. He's not clean, but he is honest. And that honesty is exactly what the story cannot allow to live. So the narrative does something chilling. It kills him off screen in an explosion, lets Leela light the match, and then quietly files the paperwork. The Bay Harbor Butcher case is closed. Doakes is the name on the board. Dexter walks away. From a distance, it looks like another clever escape. Up close, it's a moral failure so deep it warps the entire world of the show. That's the core argument this whole breakdown has been building toward. Dexter's plan doesn't fall apart when he's almost caught. It falls apart the second someone like Doakes exists and refuses to look away. The code cannot account for a righteous obstacle. The illusion of control cannot survive a witness who won't be managed. And that leads to the most unsettling takeaway. This story is not just warning us that monsters can hide among us. It's telling us we will help them hide if the truth costs too much. Miami Metro signs the report. LaGuerta swallows her doubts. Even Deb, eventually, protects the lie. The focus is not just on Dexter's crimes, but on the collective decision to accept a convenient scapegoat over an unbearable reality. So, as we close this chapter, here's the central question we want to leave hanging. Did Dexter actually deserve to win that war with Doakes? Or did the show simply reveal how far everyone will go to maintain the fantasy? Along the way, we've seen every angle of that conflict, but now it's your turn to reopen the case. Rewatch seasons 1 and 2 through Doakes' lens. Track every scene where he's right and everyone else is wrong. Then tell us in the comments, is he the real hero of Dexter, or just another casualty of a world built to protect Dexter's myth? And while you're there, let us know which character, relationship, or storyline you want us to break down next in this same analytical style, because this investigation into Dexter's collapsing control is only just getting started.